Thank you. With that, I'm going to welcome Mr. Fraser up to the dais. We are now transitioning from a Budget Subcommittee 6 hearing to an informational hearing on the Department of Motor Vehicles, along with Assembly Transportation, along with the Assembly Accountability Committee. And we're going to ask the first panel from the Department of Motor Vehicles to come on up.
I was so excited, I just crashed.
Most of the middle.
Yeah, as needed.
Thank you. So now we are going to be beginning the oversight hearing on Department of Motor Vehicles. I was going to ask my two fellow co-chairs as well as other committee members if they had any opening comments. So, Ms. Petrie-Norris?
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here with us this afternoon, and I think thank you for stepping into this very important role for the DMV and for the state of California. Look forward to an update on the progress that's been made so far and plans for how we continue to move the department forward in the future. And I appreciate all the hard work that you and your team have put into trying to transform this department for California. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fraser.
Mr. Ting, thank you very much for inviting me to join your committee today at this hearing. As I said in last year's joint hearing, in many ways the DMV is the face of California's government. It is the agency that Californians most often interact in some way, whether it's for vehicle registration, obtaining a driver's license, or renewing a driver's license going forward. Since our hearing last August, we have seen a modest improvement at the DMV. Wait times are down about an average of an hour. This is largely due to the fact that over 1,000 new employees have been hired at field offices. DMV has also expanded the use of kiosks to give consumers more options for completing their vehicle registrations. DMV and the administration have been more responsive to the legislature than they ever have been. In fact, DMV is providing monthly wait time reports to us. Recently, the Department of Finance has completed an extensive review of the challenges DMV is facing. More importantly, the new administration has made DMV a priority, which I appreciate as the chair. So far, I've been impressed by Governor Newsom and the DMV strike team's efforts to make much needed reforms. That being said, I'm concerned about the amount of resources DMV is currently requesting for the coming year. Simply adding more employees is not enough. As the Department of Finance audit highlights, DMV has to take more steps to make sure they use their existing workforce in a more effective manner. Further, while wait times are down from last summer, they have yet to meet the 45-minute goal that they had set. I look forward to the hearing from the strike team, the Department of Finance, the acting director, Kathleen Webb, who I've had many meetings with, and I appreciate her taking this on, and how we as the legislature can become a partner with the new administration fixing the agency so many of us can interact on a regular basis instead of when it's considered emergency. Thank you, Mr. Ting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Any other comments, opening comments from the committee? Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize for being a little bit late, but this is one of those days, isn't it? The DMV has been having one of those days for a couple of years now, and I want to be proactive and helpful in figuring out how we can move the department forward. We'll be spending a considerable amount of time providing oversight and reviewing the this year's budget proposal in my budget subcommittee, and I look forward to the conversation here today and the hours that we'll spend together in committee.
Thank you, Mr. Bloom. Ms. Smith?
Thank you to our chairs today, and I acknowledge the comments from my colleague. Unfortunately, I think mine is one of the districts perhaps where we haven't seen significant improvement. From the day that I was first sworn in, a number of our constituent calls, in fact, a very significant number, have been DMV related, and it has been pointed out by my colleagues here. For many, that is their first and sometimes only interaction with our state's government. And so I appreciate your willingness to be here today, my colleagues, in putting this panel together. And essentially, you know, what I'm here to say is help me help you. Because I've even asked myself, I had on a recent visit to a DMV to get my real ID, I said, what are the barriers? What are the silos? What are the things that we need to help with that allows you to serve our communities and our constituencies better? So I thank you for the opportunity to be here today, to my colleagues, and I appreciate that you're here and willing to testify.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Any other opening comments? Let me just start very quickly. This is a follow-up hearing from our hearing in August. Some of you are here again. Some of you are new to that hearing. But just to refresh everyone's memory, that hearing was held because of the atrocious wait times that were occurring all around the state, not just in my district in San Francisco, but really in every part of the state. And unfortunately, the department was late to the game in really reacting, having a plan. I do want to commend Department of Finance on their very good audit that they just finished. But unfortunately, when we were here last in August, there were appropriation requests. We did our part in making sure that the budget that was passed in June had appropriation. We also did our part to do augmentation later on in the fall. Unfortunately, some of that augmentation went to staff. The staff were hired, but what the audit demonstrated was the staff weren't trained. So just in my small observation, staff that were deployed at different offices were either standing around or really not able to do the most basic duties. They were just standing around handing out forms rather than actually being behind the counter, trained on the computers, able to serve and process customers. We were told by the then director that one of the solutions around wait times was every field office was going to get tablets, and the tablets were going to be used real time to really help manage wait times. So what did we find? We found that yes, the tablets were purchased, but then not used. So again, if we approve new computers and you buy the new computers, it's great, but they just sit in a box in your DMV field offices. I don't know how that meets our understanding of what that was supposed to be spent on. In addition, we talked about, she very proudly talked about the texting software that was to be used at the field offices. So again, software was used, software was purchased, so the licenses, I assume, were there, but guess what? They weren't used. So the question coming before the Budget Committee is, you have a 10 to 20% request to increase your budget by 10 to 20%, your $1 billion budget, to be increased by $200 million. How can you give us the confidence that it will be spent correctly and it will be spent efficiently while our transportation chair is correct? The wait times are down, so that's good. We also know that millions of Californians are going to be coming in for real IDs. So what's the plan for the next 2 to 5 years to really deploy resources? We saw what's planned to implement the finance audit's recommendation, and I guess who are we giving the money to? So the previous director, who's no longer here, decided to retire, which I think was a smart move before coming back to this committee, swore to us that they were implementing all these things and then hightailed it out of town and didn't do it. So why should we give you an additional $200 million of resources to spend on tablets that sit in a closet, and to spend on software that's not used, and to spend on people that aren't trained? So if you could answer those questions, would welcome that in this committee. Again, we have a number of panels and segments, so we are going to be first just getting some background and then talking about the wait times update. Then we have a discussion on the evaluation of the DMV operations. We have the strike team coming forward, and then going forward, we have the discussion around current year and budget year funding requests. But let's begin. Acting Director Webb.
Good afternoon, Chairman Ting and Frazier and Chairwoman Petronoris and committee members. I am Kathleen Webb. I am the Acting Director of the Department of Motor Vehicles, and with me today is Robbie Crockett, our Deputy Director of Administrative Services, and Colleen Solomon, our Deputy Director of Field Operations Division, and we hope to answer all the questions that you have raised here among all of you. The opportunity to come before you and address our progress is very important to all of us, and I want to be able to share with you what we're doing in reducing waiting times, implementing Real ID, and the progress that is being made to reinvent the DMV, not only at the customer service level, but also at the top of the organization. As the new acting director, I am excited about the opportunities to modernize the DMV operations and the decision-making process to not only better serve our customers, but to restore confidence and trust back into the department that has seen struggles lead to public frustration and government embarrassment. Later on, you will hear from Secretary Batcher, and we both share a perspective that it is the beginning of a process focused upon delivering services to customers in the way they want us to deliver it. The DMV has taken significant action to improve customer service, and we will continue to do so in the months ahead, as further improvements are certainly needed. Additionally, we also need to think of creating the DMV of the future. This will require a commitment from the whole team at DMV, and I can tell you that they are committed to doing this. I'm also very appreciative of the support and partnership provided by the Government Operations Agency Strike Team with this effort and the progress that we have been making to ensure that we are delivering easily and effective customer service. The Department of Finance performance audit revealed that there are many, many challenges facing DMV. Much improvement is needed at all levels of DMV's operation and services to our customers. Indeed, new leadership, new inspiration, new ideas are all needed in this process of reinventing the most publicly accessed department in the state. So I'm here to assure you that we are paying attention. I am paying attention. And I take this audit very seriously, knowing we need to instill more than ever good fiduciary responsibilities and practices and create work performance benchmarks to achieve measurable outcomes. This will help the legislature in knowing that the DMV is managing its resources and delivering on its commitments. DMV's future depends on it, and every recommendation in the performance audit will be thoroughly evaluated and responded to in our corrective action plan within the next 60 days. As I have mentioned, this is the beginning of a process towards something better. The DMV of the future is an achievable destination. We can get there together, with many additional improvements in the short term and others coming over time. The DMV is committed to reducing wait times for customers, offering more external service channels to reduce the need for field office visits, and with the help of our partners, reimagining delivering services in ways that customers want them to be delivered now and into the future. This means improving Real ID transactions, improving Real ID outreach, improving Real ID training, developing better field office customer flow strategies, deploying more self-service terminals, providing more customer services online and through our business partners, and reshaping the DMV decision-making process at an organizational level. And what I mean by reshaping is that for far too long, DMV's decision-making has been a top-down hierarchy that resulted in reactive decision-making made at the very top of the organization, but without understanding the downstream impacts. There are many employees at all levels of the organization who possess knowledge and understanding of how to make meaningful improvements to DMV. A more robust and engaged enterprise governance structure that emphasizes and examines the best solutions as a team will have more accountability and take more responsibility ensuring those solutions are the most successful. Last summer, wait times were extreme and unacceptable. I wish to apologize to each of you and all of our valued customers who had to experience long wait times. I wish to share with you today that since last August, the department has successfully reduced the average statewide wait time by 91 minutes and has maintained an average statewide wait time of 1 hour or less since October. DMV has achieved its overall wait time goals in the past consecutive months since October. And although DMV has achieved its goals, this does not mean that our work is done. DMV will continue to provide effective and efficient customer service to reduce wait times, enhance the customer experience at DMV field offices, and provide innovative solutions for added customer convenience outside of the traditional field office. Our success in reducing wait times is directly attributable to solutions funded through prior budget allocations, and we do sincerely appreciate the legislator's support in funding. Hiring 900 temporary new employees by October 2018, triaging customers waiting to improve and expedite handling of transactions, using smart tablets to check customers into the queue faster and to also assist customers with accessing online services and to schedule an appointment, providing an expedite line for easier transactions like obtaining a driving record or picking up license plates and disabled placards, providing text message notifications to customers so they can have flexibility to leave the DMV field offices and return when their queue number is to be called, improved integration of our driver's license application process so that technician keystrokes are reduced and customers spend less time at a technician window. Additional service hours, 7 a.m. start time in 16 offices, and Saturday services at 62 offices from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. Enhancing office performance and efficiencies in some field offices for customers waiting by pre-screening their documents, so when they arrive at a technician window, the document review is already complete and reduces the transaction processing time. Monitoring field office wait times in real time through the DMV Command Center, and offering services that do not require visiting a field office. We acknowledge we submitted a significant budget request for 2019-2020 to the legislature, which will be discussed further in panel 3. We do not take this lightly, and we must be good stewards of resources and funding granted and to be transparent about our efforts with the legislature and the public to restore confidence and trust. But on the issue of wait times, I want to share with you that this is not just a field office concern. It is also a concern in DMV's call centers. The average customer call wait time is 50 minutes, and the maximum wait time has been as high as 2 hours to almost 5 hours during peak periods. This is simply not acceptable, and even with features that include virtual hold, providing a callback to a customer when a call center representative is available, this virtual hold also gets overprescribed and is not available to all customers. DMV wants to ensure that all customers contacting DMV by phone or online are timely served and do not encounter long, frustrating wait times. That is why DMV is proposing new services that are widely used by almost every major retailer. Services like live chat and customer service email, allowing customers to contact via the internet to a real DMV representative who can lend customer assistance, and Chatbot, a virtual representative providing assistance on some of the most frequently asked questions and topics at the DMV. These are just two services that will enhance the customer experience, reduce wait times for assistance, and deliver services in the ways customers want them.
If you could wrap up.
Yes. We acknowledge that there are multiple ways that we need to go ahead and address these challenges. Our online appointment system is another area that we're addressing those and working with our vendor to expand services and also manage the blocking of appointments. The Real ID is the major priority of what we need to achieve in order to accomplish that and our compliance responsibility to the Department of Homeland Security. We feel that we have to really aggressively market and raise awareness and education with our customers so that they come in the most prepared. And everything indicates that when a customer comes in most prepared, the processing time is so much shorter than when they don't. We have heard that customers actually that come in prepared can get in and out of that transaction in 10 minutes. So that is a goal we are aggressively addressing because that means we can see more people. We've actually...
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Again, let me just reiterate why we're here, because I appreciate your speech, Acting Director Webb, but it sounds almost identical to the speech that was given to us in August in terms of many promises that were made and not fulfilled. So the question is how do we ensure that what you say actually gets done? So I'm going to give Ms. Crockett a minute and Ms. Martin a minute, or Mr. Crockett a minute, excuse me, and let's get to member questions. Or if you don't have anything to add, you could be the most popular guy in the room and not say a thing.
No, I'm good.
Finance.
Thank you. Amanda Martin, Department of Finance. Very briefly, by way of background, your agenda on page 6 lays out the funding requests, the history of the funding requests. The first four rows, including the August 2018 request, pursuant to Provision 2, have already been approved by the legislature. I would note that the 17-18 proposal was originally a 5-year proposal, but the legislature, understanding that implementation was just getting started, only approved the first 2 years of funding, anticipating that we would be back in 1920, which is where we are now. The administration also submitted additional requests on January 3rd through the JLBC process, and based on discussions with legislative staff, we committed to extending that review period until you could have a hearing, which is why we're here today. In keeping with that commitment, we have released the audit, the first few months of the strike team's work, and our spring proposal to be discussed later. Lastly, I would just note, as has been mentioned, the Budget Act of 2018 requires DMV to submit monthly wait time reports through at least December 31st, 2020, which is after the October 1, 2020 deadline, and we will continue to submit those to keep the legislature apprised of our progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Ms. Petrie-Norris.
So I think the chair raised, I think, some concerns in terms of promises that had been made previously and not met. And I think there's a resistance then to just sort of pour good money after bad, as the case might be. I think you as well acknowledged a need to rebuild kind of confidence and trust in the DMV and in the DMV's leadership's ability to actually get things done and actually deliver. One suggestion I would have is, I think a way to rebuild confidence and trust is by setting near-term concrete deliverables and milestones. And I do appreciate, you seem to have a more expansive and ambitious agenda, which I do appreciate, but I think it would be really helpful, certainly for me and for this committee, to say, okay, here's what we're going to deliver in the next 2 months, 4 months, 6 months. And then as we hit those milestones, we can allocate additional funding. I guess A, is that an approach you'd be comfortable with? And B, what are those concrete deliverables and milestones that we could look forward to over the course of the next, say, 2, 4, and 6 months?
So we're going to address a lot of that, and I think Secretary Batcher will address some of that with regards to our work with the GovOps strike team. I think the way I would probably approach this is, one, alternative service. We really need to move forward with offering alternative services and get people out of the field office. So the expansion of kiosks would be something that we could measure. I believe also the expansion of online services and improving our website is something we can measure. I think those are tenable, and they obviously have an illustrative capability. And then the other thing is to measure the take-up rate. I think, are these hitting the mark for our customers? Do we see a take-up rate going on? I think, Chairwoman, you brought up something that's always important to me is, what are those key performance indicators that we need to put in place at the DMV that measure we're achieving the customer goals that we are seeking? We know that in order to process Real ID, which requires in-person handling, there is no alternative for us to issue a Real ID. I need to move transactions out of the field office so that we can accommodate the volume of people that are going to be coming in. We'll talk about those numbers in further detail, but early projections, I would say, are we should anticipate about 700,000 people coming in on an annual basis. On a monthly basis. On a monthly basis. I wish it was annual. On a monthly basis, they should be coming in. So the more that I can move out and allow the field office to handle complex transactions or Real ID transactions, the more time we'll have for those appointments. So let's measure that. I think the other thing is call centers. I think we need to measure how quickly we're able to go ahead and service people in the call center. We're looking at the ability to handle transactions in the call center environment in our new contract with our vendor. but I also don't want people to be waiting in a call center environment when they need some immediate answers. So again, providing those alternatives could be measurable areas. Again, what's the take-up rate? Are customers actually using these tools? Does this meet the needs? If it's not meeting their needs, then I say we stop using it. But part of it's marketing those tools and making sure that people know they're available. I think, as I pointed out, these are tools that are customarily available in any kind of retail environment, or if you go online and do any kind of work with an online entity. So why not make these available for DMV customers as well? From a field office standpoint, we agree with you. We're looking at ways to go ahead and do business process improvement in all of our offices. I think that's something that came up in my meetings with all of you, is those that are offices that are high performing. What are the best practices in those high performing offices that actually could be applied in other offices? There are some nuances that we have to be mindful of. Not every office is designed the same way, therefore flow is not exactly the same. The other thing that we're aware of is in certain offices, there are certain products that our customers want versus other products, so we look at product line being serviced based on those offices and those customers, but we're looking at those efficiencies. I think the thing I'm very excited about, and I think can give us some measurable key performance indicators, is the work we're currently doing with McKinsey and their assessment of the customer experience that's going on right now. We anticipate getting a report from them by May, June. I think we're going to have some outstanding recommendations coming from them. And we look forward to implementing those recommendations to improve the customer experience. The other thing we're asking from all of you is the ability to educate our customers. And again, as I said earlier, a prepared customer means it's a shorter experience at the DMV. If they come in fully prepared with all of their documents in hand, we can process them very, very quickly, which means I can actually have more people come into the office from an appointment standpoint. If it's not a 30-minute experience just in front of a counter, it's a 10-minute experience, then think about in that same period of time, I can actually take in 3 more people. Multiply that by all the customer counters. That means we can start taking in more people. So when you say what are those key performance indicators, we can put those things in place. We need the resources to do that. That's the request we're making from all of you. And a lot of it has to do, we've got a short-term need that we need to address in issuing Real ID. What I'm also thoughtful about as a good steward is that as we get through this immediate need to issue Real ID, what are the efficiencies that we're gaining as we go forward, and how do we need to staff the DMV on a go-forward basis? And those are something I think we owe to you as well.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And I've got some follow-up questions, but I might save them for the Secretary's presentation. Don't want to steal her thunder.
No.
So just to follow up, then I'll go to Mr. Fong. What is the take-up rate for kiosks and online as of now?
I don't have those numbers in front of me. I'll see if my colleagues do. But I can tell you, at the kiosks at the DMV offices have stayed about the same. But one of the things that I am very thoughtful about is putting kiosks in DMV offices means I'm taking more people into the DMV office. What we are finding as we put them out into retail outlets or our AAA offices, the take-up rate in those offices actually increased dramatically. And so we believe with good marketing and education and people able to Google and find where a kiosk is, they can actually probably see a higher take-up rate. The other thing is our vendor is very good at looking, because they don't want to be at a kiosk if it's not going to get traffic, is working with them to identify good retail outlets and our AAA partners where we can beneficially put in kiosks to take up that activity. So we have a marketing plan from the vendor to look at that. Do you guys have the numbers on the kiosks? Yeah.
So, sorry. So in, just from a year from now, from February 2018, in the SSTs, our self-service terminals, we processed about 162,000 transactions. And then February 2019.
Out of how many kiosks?
That was, should have been about 100 and, I think it was about 100 and, no, it's 152 now. I think it was about 120.
120?
Yeah.
Approximately, okay.
And then in February 2019, it was 178,000. And that was at 152 kiosks.
And again, those are with limited services in them right now.
Correct.
With expanded services, we could see a take-up rate that we would want to monitor.
Okay. And then what about online?
Online, we process about 17 million transactions a year.
And has that got up and down? Up or down?
It continues to climb. It doesn't, maybe climbs about 1 million a year.
But again, with expanded services, we can see that actually grow.
Okay. And then just to finance, I just want to have this stated for the record. The budget, the approximate budget for the agency DMV is about $1 billion with about 8,000 full-time employees, roughly, or 8,000 employees.
With prior to this request, about 1.1 billion, and 8,000 sounds about right. 83.
So the request is for 2,000 new positions and for $242 million. So just roughly, you're asking for a 25% increase on money and about a 25% increase on staffing. Is that roughly correct?
So in terms of total temporary positions, 2,000 is correct. Only 178 of those are permanent positions because we are anticipating significant increases in traffic. So 2,000 temporary positions is what we estimate based on our assumptions related to the number of people who will be coming in for a real ID and the dollars that go with them.
And what's the length of time that we said? Are we asking for 3 years, or how many years are you asking for the temporary positions?
The 2,000 is 1 year is the highest number, and then it drops down as we would expect the workload to drop down. This proposal fleshes out our assumptions all the way through 22-23.
Very good. Okay. Thank you. Mr. Fong.
Thank you very much. Thank you for being here. I echo the sentiments of the chairman and of Assemblymember Peter Norris. My patience, I guess I can say I don't have any patience anymore when it comes to what's happening. It's ironic to me, and I was talking to my colleague, Assemblymember Patterson today, that we're having this hearing at the very day that, according to your Twitter account, DMV offices were impacted by a connectivity issue this morning from a hardware failure at the state data center operated by the Department of Technology. So you had a statewide failure today? Is that correct?
We had an outage.
And can you share some specifics of what happened?
I will share them with you from a layperson's perspective, but I will tell you that there was a system at CDT which supports the DMV systems, but it also supports other departments as well. And it had a failure, which then affected all of our offices. But we were able to go ahead and restore fully to all our offices. I believe it was, Colleen, about 10 o'clock, 10:30. And then we had
Full transparency, I called your office at noon and it was still down. Or I called the 1-800 number. I just out of curiosity to see if it was still functioning.
Yeah, so then what I was going to follow up and say is that we had a subsequent failure with about 50 of our offices. And at this point in time, it's my understanding that they are restoring those offices. We had to go through a reboot of our DMVA system. And my understanding, if you were to call now, I haven't looked at my emails yet, but my understanding is they would be functional at this point in time.
So just so that everyone here understands in the public, there were 2 outages today?
Yes.
Okay. And now I want to delve into this specific relationship that the Department of Motor Vehicles has with the California Department of Technology. On page 4 of the committee analysis, it outlines the information technology's impact on the field office's customer experience, and you outline a number. There's, of course, outlined is a number of problems with insufficient network system infrastructure, weaknesses in existing DMV project prioritization. What is your relationship with the California Department of Technology? Who ends up being accountable in between that relationship? Is the Department of Technology accountable when something fails, or is it the DMV?
Well, not to speak for CDT, but we are a customer of CDT, and they handle some of our hardware and our technology support mechanisms. So we do have a, what I call service level agreement with them, a contractual relationship. We pay for those services. And so there are programming things that we are responsible for. And then it's kind of our backup systems and our IBM systems and everything else that we've talked about that we have a great need to address. They are, I think our outages point out, we have a very fragile system at the DMV, and it's an old system.
So when there is an outage or when something happens like today, does the CDT come and fix it, or do you have people that go and fix it? Walk me through the relationship and what happens.
So for this particular situation, because the failure occurred with a CDT system, CDT was actually, staff was working with repairing the system with probably the vendor, I don't know specifically, but presume it was with a vendor, to go ahead and repair or reboot that system. They were then in communication with our IT folks with regards to what we needed to do on our side, and also be able to address what we could from our side. But when we isolated and did some root cause analysis, it was determined that the failure was actually within a system at CDT. All we can do then is inform our staff and try to go and handle our customer service to the best we can in our offices, and then work with them with regards to any kind of reboot we have to do of our own system on our side. So there is a sequential activity that needs to take place as well, and then testing to make sure that when it does come up, we haven't lost anything as well.
So then just simple question then who do we hold accountable in this circumstance? Who is ultimately responsible? Is it CDT?
You know, that's a complex question, I have to be honest with you.
Well, there's only two entities.
Yeah,
there's
I
either
know.
CDT or
There's
DMV.
There's CDT and there's DMV. And then there is incredibly old infrastructure that just can't be supported anymore. We have a system that is an IBM system that IBM can't support anymore. We have to migrate over to an updated IBM system, and I will tell you, it's not even where it needs to be, but it gets us in a more stable environment than we need to be. So I could also tell you, it's aging infrastructure, and we have practice deferred maintenance on this aging infrastructure that has to be addressed.
So then when you roll these kiosks and everything that you're supposed to, these tablets that, that Chairman Ting talked about, they obviously have to be supported by this infrastructure, correct?
They receive information fed from our systems. The kiosks are basically standalone systems, but they do receive interface with our system so we can process the applications.
So when the systems go down, do these kiosks still work?
The kiosks, my understanding, are also impacted. I think AAA was impacted, the kiosks were impacted.
So, it seems to me then that that when the system goes down, everything stops.
At that level, yes.
Okay, and then so who is then ultimately responsible then to, so as a customer of CDT, I mean, I don't want to pick on CDT, but I have no choice, right? Is that when you want to improve this infrastructure and the IBM mainframes and whatnot, do you go to CDT and say, we want you to purchase and upgrade and implement what we want, or does CDT come to you and say, this is what we're going to do for you, and then you say yay or nay?
So that's a joint effort, because there is oversight that CDT has for the DMV. But I also will tell you the approach that we want to take this year is put it out, because I think technology is something that's very rich in California. I think we have a lot of partners here in California that I think can actually help us solve our problem at DMV. And so our goal is to reach out to our technology private sector partner to look at solving the technology problem at DMV. And so our approach in the FES, the front end sustainability, is to take that strategic approach and not try to solve it ourselves, because I don't think that's the right approach. I think is to reach out to, our rich technology knowledge in the private sector to see if we can figure out how to transform the DMV technologies, because this is a transformation. It is a full-on transformation. How do we transform the DMV systems while also ensuring the protection of really critical data and the security of that data as we transform it?
Sure. I'll just say this, and I don't want to spring this on you, so I apologize, but it's something that comes up because there's a clear pattern of failures here when it comes to, and it may be more CDT than the DMV, so I just will throw it out there. But so you've got these smart tablets that aren't being implemented. We have the outages, 2 outages that happened today, and then there was a very concerning investigative story in the LA Times today about the mismanagement of the motor voter program and the confusion and the chaos that was evident as it was rolling out. And of course, the DMV and CDT were involved with that, along with the Secretary of State. And so, I guess the concern for me is that as we roll out these, if information technology and the IT system is the core problem, then, and you're asking for $242 million above the existing budget, how much of the $242 million is going to new infrastructure and IT or improving this IT infrastructure challenge?
I have to turn to Robbie to those numbers for you. But 2 things that I hope give you some assurance while he's pulling up the numbers is I agree that we need to give you assurance that's going to be spent appropriately. Part of it's establishing a very strong governance structure at DMV that looks at the enterprise and measures risk, measures strategic goals, and measures performance. The other piece that, and I want to bring in a consultant to help put that in place and embed that into the DMV organization. The other piece that I want to bring in, because I don't think our strength is in this area at DMV, is project management. Because with the multiple projects that we're going to have going on, I want to have strong project management that's actually reporting to me.
And that's an important part, but if the project management is at CDT and CDT is the actual problem, then we've actually created the problem. We made the problem worse, correct?
Correct. And I'm not going that route. I'm actually going out with a contract to bring in somebody outside to be a project management office for me, reporting directly.
So then why do we have the CDT?
Well, in this effort, I'm not sure that there's staff to actually handle the volume that we're looking at the DMV. And I would have.
And this is not a hearing on CDT, so I apologize. I'm just trying to understand. And if you could
The numbers?
give the numbers.
So yeah, so within the proposal, we actually have 2 items that are associated with IT improvement. One is for IT redundancy, which is working through CDT. It's about $4.6 million. And that's an annual cost. And what that is for our larger offices, grades 3, 4s, and 5s. Smaller offices are grades 1 and 2. So the grade 3, 4s, and 5 offices is to allow additional line coming into the office. So if one of the lines coming from CDT, for whatever reason, goes down, there's another line that goes into that office that backs up as redundancy.
So 4.6 million.
For that. And then there's another 3.1 million for IT components, and it's really an annual replacement. And that's for servers, routers, switches, things along those lines as it relates to just from an outdated, a refresh process to do that.
So this is an important point, which I think dovetails into what Assemblymember Petrie Norris says, that if we wanted milestones and metrics, so how much would it take to fix the IT problems and the infrastructure? Not the piecemeal 4.6 and 3.1 million. What would it take to fix the problem? I mean, you said, and rightfully so in your opening statement, that we're looking for the DMV of the future, right? I have no interest in approving a budget augmentation that doesn't fix the problem. So what fixes the problem? Not more staff, but if infrastructure is the key component, and if your 2,000 staff members can't even do the work because the IT system failed, and they're sitting there doing nothing, and they're getting yelled at by customers, rightfully so, how much fixes the problem, and what do we need to do to fix the problem?
So I'll let Robbie speak to it, but I know we put together a 5-year plan on addressing our infrastructure, which is entitled the Front-End Sustainability. We've actually had some further strategic conversations about the manner in which we're going to move forward with that. My perspective on this, and to your point and you're asking for, is the first thing I want to see put in place is an enterprise architectural plan that moves us into the future. And we don't have that plan right now, but we have to create that enterprise architectural plan that acknowledges all the product lines that are serviced by DMV, and then the aging infrastructure, and how do we transition from our aging infrastructure to a new system that's much more flexible, nimble, and robust for our needs. That's a 5-year project, and I think the goal is to take an agile approach to that, but the first thing is to come up with a plan to ensure the safety and security of our system. But when I said I want to go out with a problem statement, is how do we go ahead and solve the current state of the DMV technology to make sure that it actually meets our needs on a regular basis 24/7?
I appreciate the answer. I think I couldn't agree more that we need a plan. We've been waiting for this plan for a very long time. I'm only in my second term, and I believe that my predecessors have been waiting for that plan as well. So I'm not picking on the DMV. I'm probably more picking on the Department of Technology right now. But I think for us as legislators, as stewards of the tax dollar, we have to see the plan first. And so we make decisions, I've said this before in the last hearing, and I'm repeating myself, but we make decisions on imperfect information. All of us do. And we know 1 inch about everything. And so providing us with additional inches of information is critical. And so you're asking for $242 million above a $1 billion budget you already have. And so, and all the reviews have outlined the same problem. And you even acknowledge the same problem. And so if it's IT, if it's kiosks, if it's outsourcing to the AAA or everything, or all the things that's included in this plan, then just tell us the plan. And we can evaluate what that plan is, and then we can determine whether we should fund it at that level. But if you're piecemealing it, and all we're doing is approving $242 million every single year on top of $1 billion, and at the end of the day, that doesn't fix the problem, then I don't know what we're gonna do when we come back next year and we're having this exact same hearing. And so from my perspective, if the problem is technology and CDT isn't doing their job, and then all of a sudden you're gonna do an infrastructure project where you're not even gonna use CDT, you're gonna create your own system with your own IT people, then we've created multiple agencies and multiple technology departments. And that seems inefficient to me and a waste of taxpayer dollars. So I hope that over time, and I'm happy to sit down with you and work that out in terms of working out a long-term plan. And if the goal, and we all share this goal, is to develop a DMV of the future that we can all be proud of, that customers will be proud to go into or not go into, as we hope they probably don't go into now, that we can figure that out. So I appreciate your candor, I appreciate the information, but I hope you can tell that my frustration is very high.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know Mr. Cooper needs to leave, so I'm going to let him go first and then jump to Mr. Patterson.
I'll just keep it short, and I'll follow Mr. Fong's questions. And really the big thing is in the IT, I noticed in this year's budget, you want $6.2 million for 6,500 new personal computers. And for most IT programs, you have a replace and refresh program where you go along and replace a few every year. So it's one big bang, and that really goes back to fundamentally for the folks at DMV, that should be going on all along. You know, you just don't do that. I've worked IT before. I don't know a lot about IT, but I knew about refresh and replace. And as far as your project managers go, project management is not rocket scientist. It's having a project, keep it on task, and following it. So I know you want to go out. You mentioned about going out and getting some good project managers. I think you have those folks in place already. They're in the state employment already. Why are we going to go out already? And you had a project manager over some of these projects, I've been told, with the Real ID and with the, God, the other one, I can't think of what it was. Yes.
Motor voter.
Motor voter, that's it. So was the same chief over those, both project managers for those projects? The same chief from your agency?
I'd have to look at the data, but what I will tell you from a staff standpoint, our IT shop, is we do need to modernize that operation. I'm also faced with some succession planning issues that was noted in the Department of Finance audit. So I need to be looking at who do I need to recruit. And you're right, project management I can go out and recruit for. But I also know that I have an immediate need with a multitude of projects that are going on right now with some staffing vacancies that I have. But I also want to give some assurance to those who question our capability to do the job, is to bring somebody outside to do the job. But I also see as an opportunity to do some powerful knowledge transfer. I think our folks need that skill. So any contract that I would go out with and have somebody come in and do project management is with the fundamental goal of developing my staff at the same time with the knowledge transfer that they need to do that work. And we need to probably re-examine how we handle projects at DMV. That's been some of the challenges we have, but one of the challenges we have for DMV, again, because of our legacy system, we don't give ourselves enough testing time to test something before we launch it. And that's been a challenge when we've launched some of our projects, is some of the unforeseen glitches in rolling out something because of the volume of very old assembler and cobalt codes we have within DMV.
So you have some of the oldest networking systems, computer systems in the state. Is that correct?
There is my understanding.
Yes, and I know you're the acting director right now, but how long have you been with DMV for?
Since February 1st.
Okay, so you haven't been there very long, but a lot of folks come and go, but still your middle management's the crux. They run the day-to-day operations. Those folks have been there a long time. And, you know, we talk about strategic goals, and these are great word phrases and catchphrases, but ultimately it comes down to leadership doing that. It really starts with accountability. So the hard part is we've thrown a lot of money at DMV. You're asking for more money, more personnel. It's really hard to have confidence because there's a track record here going back on the BCPs and the asks that have happened over multiple years, and not much has changed. It's gotten worse. So I really don't have a lot of confidence in DMV right now to provide additional funding with that. And even just going back to the computer, just basics, 6,500 computers. You change computers over a year, maybe 1,000 every year, 500 every other budget cycle. But to change almost 7,000 computers at one time, that really makes no sense. And for someone to have the gall to put that in, where were you the past few years? Who's making this recommendation for this? IT is not, I mean, for certain parts of it, it's not really that hard. But that's just the frustrating part. And I see this, and it's just, we're just wasting the taxpayers' money. And that's probably the most troubling thing sitting here, to try and reconcile that. And that's the number one complaint we hear is about DMV. My field office, which is in Sacramento and Elk Grove, the number one complaint for each agency is about your agency. So that says something. I'm spending an enormous amount of my staff's time on DMV issues. And, you know, for folks to call in, they got to be pretty PO'd. So that lets you know, and a lot don't call in. So to me, the problem is much more significant than on the surface. So that's all I have to say for now.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper. Mr. Patterson.
I have a couple of questions with respect to Real ID and your customer wait times. I'm going to ask a couple of specific questions there. And then later, when Secretary Batcher is here, I want to talk about what the DMV of the future looks like. And in just kind of setting the stage here, I really think we have got to recognize that there is a huge problem now, and yet I believe there is a potential and a possibility to get to a DMV of the future. But the challenge you have, it seems to me, is you are in the middle of keeping a DMV operating while you are trying to figure out how you entirely re-engineer it. So unless we're willing to say we're going to shut it down today, turn it off for a while, and then fix it, that's not realistic either. So we've got the problem of today. But then I think there's an opportunity of tomorrow. And I want to address that a little bit with the Secretary. And I'm going to preface it with this. We are the 5th largest economy on the planet. We're the home of Silicon Valley. We are the state that has really demonstrated what technological and aided customer service really looks like. For example, Amazon or any of the other large technology companies. And so I want to first of all talk about right here and now with a couple of issues of concern. And then later, I want to really explore what the 21st century DMV can look like. I want to say also from the outset that I appreciated your visit with me yesterday. And we had some very direct conversations about this. And I have to say that I am more encouraged now than I was when the previous governor initiated what I thought was a rather late and sort of lackluster approach to this. What we do have now is a governor who, in my estimation, jumped out very early on this in his State of the State. And he, frankly, appointed someone that I have known and have watched for some time. And I think that Secretary Batcher was a great choice on this. And I think the strike force really does have some real opportunities here. But there's a big, big chasm between where we are now and where we have got to get to. And so I want to just remind us that this is the state that has led the world in technology, and yet we have a DMV, the institution that faces more people with essentially almost a monopoly on their service and their time. And it is, in fact, it's not working. And we all know that. We've gotten to the point that, you know, we're past the patient's side. And yet, I really think there needs to be a bit of a word of warning here. This is going to be something that's going to take some time. And you can't just close the DMV down. You think you got problems now? Why don't you, deconstruct it in such a way that you can't even do limited few fundamentals? But then there is the next question. What does that 21st century DMV looks like? I think if you can do Amazon-like technology and you can develop a DMV that doesn't just have a slogan of customer service, but actually understands that the DMV serves the customer, not the other way around. And I've heard also some suggestions that decentralizing it, asking your partners to do more. The AAA is a perfect example. There are lots of other ways that you can reduce the wait times, move folks to outside places that's much more convenient and actually helps to cut those wait times down. But there are two things I want to just ask directly here. So from my recollection, this is about Real ID. The DMV had a plan to correct its compliance issue by April 1st, but apparently failed to meet its own deadline. Now, I guess the DMV is saying it's the end of the month. My concern is, are you compliant with the federal requirements or not? It seems like the federal agency is saying, we're testing to see that you're compliant and we'll make a decision. And it seems like the DMV is saying, well, we're compliant, we're waiting for the federal government to approve our compliance. My question is, are you in fact Real ID compliant now, or are you in default of compliance and are still working on a deadline in which you're going to have to come into compliance?
So on the compliance piece with the Department of Homeland Security, we received our letter yesterday from the Department of Homeland Security. They've extended our compliance period till May 24th, 2019. They want to actually see us implement the change that we're going to be making, both for what I call the second generation of going forward, which is requiring 2 residency documents. Where there was a question that we waited to hear from Homeland Security so we knew how to implement the appropriate solution, was our folks, and I refer to them as our early adopters. When we rolled out the Real ID back in 2017, we were only requiring 1 residency document. We actually followed what another state had actually done and put that forward as our plan going forward. We later learned from Homeland Security that was not acceptable, that you have to actually require 2 residency documents. So what we need to do is address all those individuals, and there's about 3.4 million at this point that have their Real ID but submitted 1 residency document. We put forward a plan on how to get the second residency document, because my key goal was not having those 3.4 million people come back to the office. I want to be able to handle it either online or by mail. The Department of Homeland Security approved that plan. We also wanted to make sure that we understood the timeline in which to go ahead and collect the second residency document. In their letter back to us, basically we have 2 paths. They can come in anytime now if they want to and go ahead and add their second residency document to their Real ID and will reflect our records. Or at their subsequent renewal, they can come in with their second residency document. So our concern was we didn't know if they were going to require us to do that also by October 1, 2020 to collect all the second residency documents. Their letter to us says that's not going to be a requirement. So it can happen over the course of time until they renew their current license. And then we basically have been going forward with the second residency document. We basically did a soft launch. Many of our folks who have applied for Real ID have come in with 2 residency documents. I believe our website also refers them to bringing 2 residency documents. So we have only a handful of people probably since January that have not brought in 2 residency documents. But officially going forward April 29th, they must actually provide 2 residency documents to go ahead and secure their Real ID. That's the change, that's the compliance piece that we're being held to by the Department of Homeland Security.
So my understanding is then that the answer is you are presently non-compliant.
As of April 29th, we will be compliant with Homeland Security. They want to see us implement it because that will be the date we've said we will start officially, no buts, we will officially be asking for 2 residency documents.
And when you officially ask for 2, you are in compliance?
That's our understanding from the Department of Homeland Security. They will actually then get back with us appears before May 24th of 2019 to let us know if we're in compliance.
Right. Yeah, my understanding is the May 24th is the extended period.
Correct.
In email information, we've had discussions, and you know that there are significant individuals that are essentially sort of whistleblowers inside operations, and we have information that we pay some attention to. Mm-hmm. And in some exchanges with a senior legislative assistant, suggests this in an email, that this review period will end no later than May 24th of 2019. Once California meets all Real ID requirements, the Department of Homeland Security will approve the state as fully compliant. So as of now, we are not in compliance, and the activities that you are undertaking between now and May 24th will bring you into compliance. And so can you say that what you have launched and that will meet the timeline will result by or earlier than May 24th, Homeland Security's certification that you are in full compliance?
Our conversations with the Department of Homeland Security indicate that they will give us compliance once they see us rolling out as of April 29th. That's all I can tell you, is that's what they've conveyed to us, and that what we're going to be doing will actually put us into compliance.
You referenced the 3-point-some-odd million. I'm sure you have seen the Sacramento Bee story on this today. Again, I really hope that the presentations that we're hearing today that sound very much like the presentations we were hearing back formally sound similar. And the clock is ticking with respect to 3 million Californians, and you say 750,000 people through the door? What, you said a day?
Month.
A month?
Month.
A month?
Thank you.
Yeah, my point is this, that I really think that Real ID is the top of the pyramid here to get this right. And you're going to have some deadlines here to meet, and if we get to a place where it is insufficient to get to the compliance, we thought our wait lines and our difficulties and our problems and the disappointment with customers and constituents here in California was bad back then. Wait until we hit a hard line where they have by 2020, and we've got hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Californians saying, oh my goodness, I got to get in and get. So doesn't it behoove you to get compliant as soon as you possibly can? And can you assure us that compliance will be met by this deadline?
So from a compliance standpoint, as far as requiring 2 residency documents, yes, absolutely, we're going to be doing that. The challenge we have with Real ID is the fact that it's also not mandatory, it's voluntary compliance. And while we can forecast the ongoing annual renewal of driver's license and IDs that come up, we can forecast that a certain percentage of those people, I think our forecast is about 75% of those people, will opt for having Real ID, whether as a driver's license or an ID card. Because if you have a passport or some other approved document, passport with a driver's license will allow you to board a plane. The uncertainty is really how many people are going to need Real ID and want Real ID. And that's the unknown piece, is how many people in advance of their regular renewal cycle will want to come into the office because they want to opt in to get Real ID before their renewal is due. That's a bit of a guessing game. We're looking at other states and looking at the take-up rate that they're seeing. Again, how can we share best practices? What are we learning? Do we need to actually forecast it a little bit higher? To your point, I wish I had a crystal ball and had more certainty with exactly the volume. We are giving our best estimate on what we think is going to be the take-up rate, not only for people who have renewals, but people who maybe will come in advance of their renewal. But compliance is really from an individual standpoint. We will be in compliance because we find we have the process for people to come in and get Real ID. If they want a Real ID, they can come in and get it. The question is when they show up at an airport and they want to fly, do they have all the required documentation as a Californian to do that?
Yeah. One final question in this area. Have you had assurances that the Real ID format, what it looks like and it physical when you have it, is that in compliance with the expectations of the federal government?
Yes, that is.
Okay. One other point here with respect to customer wait times, and one of the things that troubled me about the audit was the apparent lack of candor, and frankly, I don't want to say it wasn't telling the truth, but it sure felt like it when it comes to tracking the time a customer waits in line before they are checked in. And so if you go on the website represents a certain wait time. And the audit determined, I think, that that was not accurate. I asked former Director Shimoto about this the last time she was here, and she insisted that the DMV was working on ways to track the complete direction or the duration of wait times. And as of the audit, the conclusion was that the audit mentions that this as well, that this pre-queue issue. So basically, you know, you have to wait in a line to take your ticket. It seems like that what the DMV has done is said that's the wait time when you take the ticket. Nobody seems to understand or want to report that you're going to end up sitting in a wait time and in a line that is much longer than the time it takes you to get the ticket and to get to the window. Can you assure us that the wait time information will be precise and accurate and represent the real wait time that people have to endure? I must tell you that most people who contact us about the DMV, and it's been a lot over these last 3 years, the trust factor and the believability of the DMV is just, it's shredded. And part of it is that you can't trust what shows up on the DMV website to be actual. People say, well, you got an hour wait, and they go in and they wait an hour and a half or two. Or you have a half-hour wait time, and it's actually an hour and a half. So will the data and the information that you put on the website that says to people, you're going to expect this at Fresno, or you're going to expect this at Sacramento, and that it will be an appropriate calculation from the time that they get in the front door, wait through the line to get the ticket, pull the ticket, and then get to the window?
So I'm going to turn this over to Colleen, but I want to clarify that we have a methodology, and I'll have Colleen speak to that methodology, but we also continue to look at ways to improve that methodology to ensure an accuracy. I think to your point, we need to provide our customers with a reasonable expectation that when they go to an office, what is that wait going to be? And so with that, Colleen, you want to talk about how we're currently measuring that?
Sure. So currently, you can hear me. Currently, as you stated, Assemblymember Patterson, it's a manual tracking system. So at the top of each hour, it's very akin to a Disneyland or a park type avenue. Take that card at the top of the hour, we give it, we record it, and it's a manual tracking. And I share your concern as well that what you see on the website truly is only reflective of the time that the ticket is issued until the customer is served. And over these last couple of months, we've really been exploring ways that we can track the total customer journey, and we've begun that. We began piloting. We have an office in Northern California, our Carmichael office, that has mobile workstations. Those mobile workstations have the tablet on the Ergotron, for lack of a better word, and as the customer comes in, they are immediately entered into the queue, and then they head on to their DL next steps or their VR next steps. That mobile workstation has the ability, it charges overnight, has the ability to go outside as well. Carmichael is a unique office that they have repeaters and that the signal goes out. We have other offices in Southern California that are also piloting this, and really it is on, it's contingent upon the ability to have the signal reach outside of the building. So we do recognize it. So what you see for Carmichael is truly reflective of your entire customer journey. It's very, very important to us.
Yeah. With a suggestion,
Yes.
you have a methodology that is at the best unclear and possibly even a bit deceiving. It's not accurate. Why don't you say something on the website page that says this is an estimate? You may end up waiting a lot longer. Do you do that presently? Do you warn them that this is a guess? It could be worse, if you show up.
Sure.
Something that basically tells folks, we understand and we're trying to do our best, but when you tell them one thing and then their experience is something else, and you don't give them the kind of warning that every retailer, every technology operation, you see it on advertisements, right? At the bottom of the advertisement, results may vary. This is a real world of real communications with real people. I'm hoping that your communications will not trust itself in a formula that is misleading, and that you clearly let people know what they can expect. That's why they're coming to the website.
No, I appreciate that suggestion. It does indicate on our website, it probably could be a lot more predominant, a lot more out there and visible, that the time that's reflected on the internet is reflective of the ticket until your transaction. It does not indicate the pre-queue time. But agreed, we can do a far better time. Yes.
And in that, do you say that wait times could possibly be longer?
We do not,
Yeah.
that I've seen. No. Yeah.
Thank you.
But thank you for the suggestion.
Mr. Frazier had one quick follow-up question to Mr. Bro, and I'm going to ask a question in between.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate you taking this on, and again, please take this as constructive dialogue. We had talked in the past, and the legislatures, and I beg your pardon if this has been asked and answered. I had to go over to Human Health Services to testify, but the legislature has had an opportunity to create quite a workload for the DMV over a period of time. Can you share, has it adequately been funded with what like AB 60, motor voter, AB 93, all of these things that continually pile up, and then us going, well, we told you, can you share with me the additional things that we've asked you to do? Has it been funded in an appropriate way? Not only funding, but the manpower that it was requiring. And were you just taking it all on and just as an organization and saying, legislature wants us to do this and we're going to do the best we can?
So I'm going to have Robbie provide a little bit more institutional knowledge, but let me share with you my observation in the 2.5 months I've been at DMV. I think there is a bit of a good soldier attitude that they just presume there is when they're asked to do things, they do it. But what it does also is cause a reprioritization of things that need to be done. I know that Assemblymember Cooper brought up the refresh, and you're right. In any other department, I would see refresh as a normal activity, but not when you're absorbing costs that are actually not factored into your budget. Then in order to pay for those costs, then something else has to go. And the DMV has been faced with those challenges with regards to their budget. With regards to probably the history, we ran kind of a tally of the number of bills that have been passed in the last 8 years that required DMV to actually implement programs, and more importantly, address programming changes within our very fragile technology environment. And there are 120 bills that have been passed by the legislature requiring the DMV to do something with regards to its programs and products that it services. Now, Motor Voter, which I've become very acquainted with in the last 2 months, one of the things that I'm instituting right now at DMV, because it's really important for us to get Motor Voter right, and I have to staff it correctly. It's been treated basically as a project, and what I'm moving forward is establishing a governance structure, and then I'm ensuring that I get the data that documents the FTEs required to run a Motor Voter program in the manner in which we're delivering it right now at DMV. We're also looking at opportunities to improve processes, because when I come before you, if there's a resource request we have to present to you, maybe next year, we'll see, but I want to come in with full justification of what the process requirements are for DMV to handle Motor Voter. And I don't know that's always been done at DMV. I'm not sensing that there is that level of assessment to really take a look at, if we're going to do that, what does that require? Sometimes it's just a programming change. But a programming change at DMV on its IT system is anything but easy. And again, I think we need to go back and re-examine. And what I would ask is your consideration in anything you task us with further. If it really is an emergency, give us the opportunity to transform the organization before you ask us to do more program changes to a system that's just not equipped to do it.
Well, and I ask that because there are several bills in my committee that I'm contemplating holding because they are impactful on the DMV. And I'm trying to allow the strike force to be proactive and find out what's going on before we pass more bills and create more onerous tasks for you. But I will tell you, some of these tasks that you have taken on may have been a burden in some ways or form, but like AB 93, the veterans designation, brought $100 million into veterans benefits with the SB1 and the program changes that you had to do with the registration. You know, the total process is of $5.2 billion out in transportation. So there is a multiplier. Sometimes you bear the brunt, but sometimes there's others that benefit. And I need everybody to recognize that going forward. It's a business perspective. Sometimes you lose a little here, but you gain a lot here. Thank you.
One quick question. You mentioned the piloting at Carmichael regarding the track and the wait times. So I guess the question is we were here in August. We talked about this issue in August. It is now 7 months later, and in 7 months, the response has been to pilot this in one office. So what's it going to take to do this in every single office? And how long will it take?
Thank you. So part of the need for that was part of the JLBC ask as it relates for funding. And so in regards to what Colleen was mentioning in regards to the repeaters, is that a lot of the offices don't have the Wi-Fi, just like at your home, as it relates to extend to outside the offices. And in order to do that, we needed to purchase the repeaters, which took a while from the contracting perspective. And then we've got to work with the offices. If they are leased offices, we've got to work with the lessors. And so at this point, it's working very successful as it relates to Carmichael. We plan to, there's about 90 offices that we have to continue to install those repeaters at. And then we'll continue to roll it out from that perspective. The timeline, I'll have to defer to Colleen as it relates to that. But that's one of the reasons as it relates to, when we talked about it before, it was a concept, and then it became part of the JLBC ask, and then we did the contracting process for the repeaters. Then we've got to install them, and then the plan to move forward.
But I just want to clarify. So in 7 months, the department could only install one, you called it a repeater?
Yeah, it is a repeater. It helps to amplify the signal so that it can go outside of the building.
Right, but in 7 months, you could only install one?
Yes, that's what we've done thus far, and we're evaluating our current infrastructure, as Robbie indicated. We have a plan. We focused on those that have the highest pre-queue wait times. You know, as we all
Well, no,
commonly...
but you didn't answer the question. So why is it you could only install one in 7 months? At this pace, then, you know, it'd be like 30 years before you could install every department to have the rest of these.
Well, one of the things is
or was it just not a priority? because it was a priority for us.
No, it was a priority, but one of the things is to pilot to make sure it works. We don't want to go ahead and do some installs in all the offices and find out that it's not the
Okay,
appropriate.
so now that you know it works, how long is it going to take to do the rest of the office?
And so do we have the schedule yet? Yeah, we're still working on the final schedule.
Okay, so then when you come back for appropriation, we're going to have the same answer. That we're still
We
working
can
on.
get to the schedule. I know a lot of it in regards to our leased offices, it takes anywhere from 1 to 3 months as it relates to working with the lessor, because they've got to contract it out. It's not something that the state does. In the state-owned facilities, that's something that we can do ourselves. and so
No,
it's
it's
a
fine, but
quicker
let me just be
process.
clear, I apologize to Mr. Bro, but, look, if you don't have the same level of urgency to the things that are important to us, and again, this is not a partisan issue, it's completely bipartisan, because we're getting hammered by all our constituents, our phones are lighting up at home, and if this is not important to you, then we're going to have a very difficult time between now and the middle of June. So, Mr. Bro.
Don't apologize at all, Mr. Chairman. These are very valuable questions. I just want to make a comment off the line of questioning from our colleague from Fresno. I would suggest that your real ID problem is going to be in 2021 when people can't get on planes and they realize they got to come to you and your offices are going to be flooded. I want to delve down into the self-service kiosk program. In the last budget, we allocated $8 million for you. Can you give us an overview of what's been going on, how many were bought, what site selection process is?
You want to go into that?
So with the SST program, we don't pay for the actual SSTs. It's a per transaction cost. And so we work with the vendor as it relates to pushing them out into retail. So now we have the 152. Prior to that, we were right around 100. So we expanded out the number of SSTs. So we work with the vendor, and actually for the external ones, the big push for the department is to increase the number of external SSTs that we have, so that way we don't have individuals actually going into the office, taking up a parking spot, walking into the lobby. And so the big push and the direction has been is try to get as many external SSTs as possible out there. And so we've increased that bandwidth. And the vendor charges, it's $3.95 per transaction. And so we continue to work with the vendor. The goal is, in conversations with the strike team, is they want to actually expand the number of SSTs and actually do another 200, with a goal of doing another 100 this summer and another 100 by the end of the fiscal or the calendar year.
Okay, so right now you have 152. That's basically 3 per county.
Yeah.
If you spread them out. And are they allocated like that, or how are they allocated? Or 100 of them go to LA, 50 of them go to San Francisco?
I don't know the allocation off the top of my head. I know it's on our website. We actually have an SST locator. I don't know the locations off the top of my head.
Okay. We've been contacted by the shipping and freight industry that say there's a tremendous backlog in carrier permit applications. Can you discuss that?
So I know there was an issue that came up, and I spoke with Assemblymember Patterson about that as well. There was, my understanding is that there was a program glitch, for lack of a better term, in that system. Again, that's kind of a product line system. It was on both the program side as well as the IT side. This had nothing to do with CDT, is my understanding. That issue was addressed, and my understanding is we don't have any outstanding permits that are required to be processed right now. Now, that being said, we certainly have reached out to the associations that we communicate with on a regular basis to identify any outstanding issues that they believe still exist. And I know one of the associations that expressed some concerns and spoke to Assemblymember Patterson about that as well is the Tow Truck Association. So I've actually reached out to them, and we will have a meet and greet and find out if there's any outstanding issues that we need to resolve for them.
Okay, so if someone can't get in because of an appointment, lack of an appointment, you're not going to penalize them for having an expired license or?
So from the standpoint, there are issues that we deal with, and we try to give our customers enough notice to handle their renewals in an appropriate and timely way. And then there are those that realize on the day that it's expiring that they need to get into an office, which is why we actually maintain the non-appointment lines in our DMV offices and our other business centers. So to the extent that we try to go ahead and process those as quickly as we can when they come in, when they suddenly realize they have an expiring license or registration, we try to handle that. But I do want to visit with the Tow Truck Association and others to find out what are the real challenges that they're facing. How can we actually streamline processes for these folks? Are there some fixes within our own processes or even perhaps through regulation? Sometimes our regulations are very dated and they probably could stand to be modernized, and so we're looking at those as well.
Okay. Final question is, so you're extending Saturday hours and evening hours. So in my home county of Orange, you have extended hours in Santa Ana and you have Saturday services in Costa Mesa. But we're a county of 3.3 million people. Is there any way to rotate the Saturdays? So say Laguna Hills, one Saturday a month will be open. Or does it have to be rigid where my constituents have to go to Santa Ana or Costa Mesa for these extended hours?
I will allow Colleen to address our field office plans.
We have thought about, and we've been exploring the idea of kind of having these, like you said, not having necessarily set Saturdays, but kind of pop-up locations open a Saturday in a particular rotating area to allow those folks that may not have a Saturday office close to them. So I think that's definitely something that we are strongly considering. But I also want to point out as well is that we do have extended hours, so 7 to 5, many in your region, but also this summer, because we know there's going to be an increase in folks who are coming in. We've got people out of school, vacations, they want to come into DMV, that we are also extending additional hours in 52 of our offices for this summer, for July, August, and September. So that should provide you some relief as well.
No, thank you very much.
And in your region, we've got several. Look in here. Yeah, you've got Westminster, Banning, Stanton. So
those are still Costa Mesa areas. So
Yeah.
I have Laguna Hills and San Clemente.
I've got Laguna Hills.
Good.
Yes. So they're on our list, and we recognize the need of the public, and we actually talk to the public. Would you like us to stay open late? Do you prefer early? And most folks said we'd rather do it on the way in, not stop by it on the way home from work as well. And that's also a safety and security issue as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I understand from your previous testimony that it sounds like you believe that you are on track to meet the May 24th extended deadline the federal government gave us for Real ID compliance. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Okay, my question is, what is the contingency plan if you do not meet it? And what is the legal or real-world effect of not meeting that deadline? What happens?
I think we'd have to be in conversation with Homeland Security to explain why we didn't roll out on April 29th. Because the goal is to roll out on April 29th. And we're all, as I said before, we're already asking for second residency documents. We're prepared from a programming standpoint. This is more of a programming aspect. We're prepared from a programming standpoint for our counter offices to basically accept and record 2 residency documents. That's ready to roll. They've completed their testing. And are you aware, Colleen, of any issues at this point? I'm not aware of anything.
I'm not aware of any.
Yeah, we're ready to go ahead and implement officially April 29th. And so I'm not aware of anything that will keep us from complying.
Okay, and I don't want to spend too much time on crater analysis or history of this, but how did this happen? I mean, the Real ID Act's passed in 2005, and for 13 years things kind of bob along, I guess, and then all of a sudden we're the biggest state in the technological powerhouse of the entire country, and we aren't able to figure out what it is we have to do to comply with the federal law. How does that happen? I realize this isn't, you're new, but please just tell us.
I'd be happy to share a timeline that kind of highlights what I call milestones and exchanges that we've had with the Department of Homeland Security. But through the whole process, there's been kind of a sequence of conversations. And even for the Department of Homeland Security, when it came through in 2005, it was how are they going to implement that and have oversight with all the states. What I find fascinating when you look at the history of it, we've had one state that actually filed their own legislation to not actually comply We've had other states that frankly have only just started to roll out Real ID. So, our rollout in 2017 in some cases is way ahead of the curve of many states who are still all addressing this. But part of it was the Department of Homeland Security also being sure of what implementation looked like, working through the nuances of what implementation is, what would be the standard of acceptance, and then individually every state figuring out how to manage it. Hindsight's always 20/20. I can look back and say, yeah, we could have probably done a better job of planning. Yes, we could have done a better job around governance. But I would also tell you, it goes back to, again, what I shared with you earlier. When you have 120 bills coming at you with other programming, and you've got to do programming of Real ID, but then you get bills that have sensitivity around timelines for implementation, we are having to reprioritize. And so I'm moving staff around from a programming standpoint to address the things that are coming in legislatively. And then remember, on the heels of all the Real ID activity was implementing motor voter. And so we had a lot on our plate. And it's not perfect. I can't defend it. Yes, it wasn't well planned. But we sit here today, but I think we really have a solid plan going forward. And our hope is that you recognize that we really want to be compliant. I'm not in favor of throwing people at solutions, but people at the solutions to get us through 2020 is really important until we really create alternative methods and create the DMV of the 21st century. And I think, as you pointed that out, that's going to take time. That's not going to happen in 1 or 2 years. But we do have to meet Real ID. And I agree with that which was raised as 2021 could also be a big year for us when people realize they want a Real ID.
So the headline today is 3 million Californians might have to go back to the DMV after ID failure. I think you said the real number is probably 3.4 million. Are these real IDs that were issued that are subsequently deemed non-compliant? Or what comprises that 3.4 million?
So the 3.4 million who have received their Real ID are compliant at this point in time. If they don't come in during the renewal period, and we'll have to work out, we're still in conversations of what that looks like. If of that 3.4 million, they do not provide us a second residency document, the point in time that they are up for renewal, we'll have to figure out what that looks like.
So what steps are you guys going to take or are taking to notify our constituents that need to provide a second residency document, that that's something they're going to need to do?
So we have mailers going out to all those folks that have actually part of the 3.4 million. We have a letter. Our hope is that the letter itself will actually serve as a form of second residency document. They can complete that letter in the form that's with it, and they can actually mail it back to us. They can actually do it put it in a Dropbox at a DMV office. I think the other process we're looking at is the internet, is having the capability to process that on the internet.
Will they be able to scan it into a PDF and upload it to something online?
We've actually talked about doing that as well, and that's certainly a process. I think for us, when we thought about the scanning of it, is that would require somebody at the DMV office and to staff it appropriately to go ahead and handle the scanning coming in, and then making sure it was the right document that was being scanned. So I think at this point in time, we were looking at workload demand associated with also addressing the second residency document. We felt that the 3 approaches we gave them would allow us to manage that from a workload, ensure the accuracy of it, and be able to satisfy our second residency document requirement.
So it sounds like that you're going to give people a variety of options to fulfill that requirement that do not require them actually physically going to the DMV with an appointment. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so the ones that would be left would be the folks that don't open their mail, or they don't get their mail, or they get really busy that month, or something like that, right?
Right. And we also have talked about and putting into place follow-ups. Because we really don't want to have people who, if they wanted to be compliant, we don't want them to not be compliant.
Well, and I don't want to have, and none of us want to have constituents that have a flight to go see their ill family member around the holidays when this thing finally takes effect and they try to get on an airplane, they're told they have a non-compliant ID.
Right.
I mean, none of us want to deal with that
Right.
irate constituent.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's not an acceptable level of performance for a government agency if that's where we're at.
Agreed.
So I just encourage you, please, I get that you've got a bunch of mandates and you've got a lot of balls in the air, as it were, and what I'm hearing from you and listening to this is that you've got an IT infrastructure issue that's sort of permeating a lot of these issues. Well, let's fix that. I mean, let's fix it and not throw money at more staff when we can solve a problem with technology. It's 2019. I mean, I run my business with virtually paperless if necessary. I mean, you can upload things and scan things and fax things. I mean, there's just so many different ways. The mail generally works. I mean, there's so many different ways that a government agency can use technology to not require people to have to burn their time to go and physically stand somewhere in a long line. We don't even know how long it's really going to be. So, as we're looking forward in the 5-year plan or whatever it is, I just encourage you, ask you, beg you, please look at technological solutions first, because I think in the long run, that's the kind of investment that's going to modernize this agency. I mean, I think you're hearing from everybody here. I mean, people are pissed about this. I mean, people are spending a lot of time wasted. They're going, I've got constituents, I'm hearing about it all the time, all the time. And, we got to fix these issues. And I think the strike force will give you some options. I like what I'm hearing in terms of your answer. Please, if we can cut that number of 3.4 million people that might have to come back in to get an ID that they thought was valid because of a screw up by somebody else that wasn't their fault, down to the smallest possible number, that would be excellent. I agree with you. Because that's just really not fair to people. I agree. It just isn't. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson.
Did I accurately understand the audit with respect to Real ID said that the department really didn't make it a very important priority until 2017? Was that was in the audit?
I can't speak to what was happening in 2017. I would have to turn to my colleagues who have more institutional knowledge.
Well, let's just say I know that the conclusion of the audit was precisely that it was that wasn't an issue until 2017, unless you think that the audit
and Mr.
wasn't accurate.
The auditor, the folks who did the audit are coming up next if you want to ask that question to them.
Yeah, I think I would just add, we launched in 2017, so it had to be enough of a priority for us to launch in 2017, or 2018. You're right, 2018.
Yep.
So 2017.
Yep.
Yeah.
Very quickly on the motor carrier permit. We've been receiving a lot of input in my office from this. We have had some information from your liaison, legislative liaison folks with respect to where it is. And that communication has been that the backlog is over. But does that mean that the time problems are still there? It's one thing to clear a backlog, it's another to process the current input in a timely fashion. We're getting a lot of truck operations, some small, some very, very large. Garbage truck operators. I mentioned the tow trucks. Have we seen the last of this problem here? Because here is another one, and then another one, and then another one. And so we hear that the backlog is gone, but when we ask for clarification, we really don't get a clear answer. Well, if the backlog's gone, is the time delay gone as well? That was number one. Number two, we sort of got an answer, well, there was only 5,600 and some odd permits. Well, that sounds like, well, that's just a small little amount. But those permit holders, they may have 100 trucks. They may, in the case that I mentioned on the tow truck, that could have 700 or 800 trucks statewide. So it feels like, by the incoming we're getting, that this is a significant and serious slowdown that is affecting a substantial part of the economy of California with respect to logistics and the transportation of goods. So help me understand, are we really over this problem?
I think to the extent we address the issue that created the backlog you talked about, I believe that's been addressed. as it relates to the business process associated with processing these vehicle registrations or licenses, I need to visit with not only my team, who actually manages that, but I also want to hear from our customer. I have, since I've been in my position, have met with a number of associations, whether it's the New Car Dealers Association or the Independent Car Dealers Association and others, to look at the processes in which we go ahead and interact and do business with them. And there's an opportunity for us to actually look at our business processes with them, hand in hand, and figure out how we can streamline some of those processes. The other thing that we're looking at is some of our regulations, which are very old in some cases. Is there an opportunity to look at modernizing our regulations? And in some cases, there's a great deal of opportunity to modernize our regulations and some of our requirements. So to me, that's a partnership discussion we need to have with them. How do we ensure that we provide the level of oversight to ensure safety on our roads, but also ensure that the processes are efficient? So I want to have that dialogue with them.
It still remains a concern. We're still getting input in my office today, and it's not just from our region. I've been working on this for 3 years. It started with truck drivers, and now here we are with another truck driving problem. I mean, we were making these truck driver students who graduated from educational institutions accredited by the state of California that were having to wait long periods of time just to get tested. And they were losing job opportunities at a time when we had something like 30,000 unfilled trucking positions in the state of California. And now, 3 years later, here's another truck driver issue with respect to permitting. And honestly, though, this customer service failure is really troubling because many of my constituents have said, well, if we can't get you the permit in time, the only thing you can do is shut down. Now, that's not a solution. And my hope is that you'll work with the DMV and others with respect to enforcement. You can't miss these kind of important permits and then make the people of California pay the consequences getting pulled over for something that really was out of their ability to control. So I wanted to raise that. I still think there are some problems there, and let's hope we can get to those. It's a fire drill that I think needs to happen.
I would look forward to having future conversations with you on all of that.
Thank you. That concludes our short panel 1. So we're going to be moving to panel 2, where we get to talk about the evaluations of the DMV operations. Thank you to Secretary Badger for your patience, as well as the staff from the Office of State Audits and Evaluations from Department of Finance. Secretary Badger, please start whenever you're ready.
is doing that I, yikes.
I'm sorry.
Do I need
Hit
to
the wrong
start over?
button. No, that was me. Apologize.
But my ears are plugged, so I wasn't sure. I didn't think it was on, but I can hear only out of one ear today. Anyway, so I will continue. I want to share with you some of the things that the strike team is doing that I believe will have long-term impact for the DMV and its customers. These actions, coupled with our budget proposals, will bring significant change and reinvention that is so critically needed in the DMV and to the people they serve. First, let me be clear about the mission of the strike team. Our objective is to begin the work of reinventing this important public-facing agency. We are not simply talking to people and then planning to write a report. The DMV's track record and systemic shortcomings have already been well documented. You'll hear more about them from Jennifer from the audit, and DMV's customers shouldn't have to wait any longer for the change that is so needed. The strike team is action-oriented and are already making changes that we expect will help the DMV and its customers now and well into the future. We all know the DMV is grappling with two significant issues, Real ID and Motor Voter. The Real ID has a fast-approaching deadline, which we've discussed today. Every Californian who needs to fly or enter a secure federal facility or military base and does not have a valid passport must have a Real ID by October 1, 2020. Getting a Real ID requires a visit to the DMV office, and while there is no way around that visit, we are already working on several efforts, which I will describe in more detail, to get a Real ID to as many Californians who need one before the deadline without significantly increasing field office wait times. Motor Voter is another area where we believe better outcomes are within reach as the DMV improves its training, processes, and technology. As with everything, one change is not the silver bullet, especially for an organization as large and complex as DMV, not to mention one with a history of siloed, top-down decision-making. The strike team has been working on a series of actions that I believe will bring new ways of operating, both internally and externally, to DMVs. These may start with one focus, but will, I believe, be then able to be carried through all corners of the organization. The strike team worked with the governor's office to launch a search for a permanent director of the DMV. It is now posted, of course, on the governor's website. The search focuses on the need for a visionary, pragmatic director to serve all of Californians. The strike team is working with the department in seeking qualified applicants to fill important vacancies in a number of key management positions, including leadership and customer-centered process redesigns. These roles are essential to a cultural transformation, which I believe is required to create a customer-centered DMV organization. The strike team reviewed the department's IT capacity to assess the DMV's readiness to modernize the delivery of its services. This means building IT capacity with an emphasis on human and technical infrastructure focused on service delivery, security, and reliability. Ultimately, this portfolio review of their IT systems, we found a great need to shore up key technology systems. The DMV automation system, the DMVA, which has been referred to earlier, has obsolete and proprietary programming languages and lacks flexibility to support operational changes. We decided that technical instability should be addressed prior to modernizing the front-end systems used by DMV staff in order to reduce system outages that affect the public and ensure a solid foundation for future technical and business changes. As I might say we have experienced some of those today. However, I want to emphasize that the outage this morning that was talked about was a data center issue at CDT. It was not the DMVA issue. One of the perennial frustrations with the DME is that while you can use a credit card online or at a kiosk, you can't use one when you go to the field office. Governor Newsom has called this out, and I certainly agree that it makes no sense that in an era where I can use my credit card at almost any location in the world, I can't use it at a DMV office. The strike team looked at perceived barriers to credit card use at the DMV, including security and privacy issues. The strike team and the DMV released an invitation to negotiate for bidders to respond to on March 11th. The contract will be awarded by the end of April to a credit card vendor. In May, June, we'll work to combine debit and credit card services, begin to pilot in the field office by July, with full implementation before the end of the year. As Acting Director Webb mentioned, one of our key efforts is to avoid unnecessary visits to the field office. We want to improve the DMV website. Again, that's been mentioned earlier today, how important it is, to make sure people can easily find information they need. We propose an appropriation to do a complete overhaul of the website using best practices of human-centered design with a focus on online services. This will allow us to design a modern website that puts customers first and makes it easier to conduct online transactions. If you can't find what you're looking for on a website, the next step is often to pick up the phone. Well, that experience has also been frustrating for DMV customers. The strike team brought in the Franchise Tax Board, who operates one of the most efficient call centers in the state, to do a thorough review of the DMV's call center practices and share best practices. Among its findings were that the DMV should develop an annual comprehensive hiring and training plan, use customer service simulations to evaluate candidates for basic skills needed in a call center. Manager ones have spent up to 80% of their time on phones since August. They're not available for staff development, coaching, completing reports, or other supervisory functions, which we believe they should be. Out of 429 phone agents, an average of 225 are on the phones because they are performing basic office work. Upgrade to personal computers so that technicians will have access to email and online manuals. Currently, technicians must reference paper manuals to learn the processes. I want to pause here for 1 second because Member Cooper raised the refresh of computers in our learning and that of finance. There weren't year after year refreshing of computers, and the technicians at the call centers don't even have a computer. So when a customer calls up and has something, they can't do a word search except by doing it this way. It's totally ineffective and inefficient. The DMV is already preparing an action plan to address some of the challenges that FTB has discovered, and they are already beginning to make improvements. Additionally, as Acting Director Webb testified, we hope to expand services for the public by adding tools such as chatbot, live chat, as well as the ability to process more routine transactions by phone technicians. They have a limited number of transactions that they currently are allowed to perform. We're wanting to expand those. All of our efforts are designed to help customers find accurate, easy to understand information in the manner that best works for them without having to go to the field office. To that end, we are planning to expand, this was mentioned earlier as well, the number of self-service terminals or kiosks available throughout the state and adding services to those kiosks. There are currently, which you've heard, 162 kiosks in field offices and retail and other non-field office locations. We hope to add, I think Robbie said this earlier, we hope to add at the strike team's suggestion 100 self-service terminals at key locations by summer and another 100 by the end of the year. The usage of these kiosks has risen, again was mentioned earlier, and more than 178,000 transactions were processed on the kiosks in February. This is why we hope to not only add more kiosks, but also to add more services. Currently, the machines currently only process, vehicle registration renewals, but we have learned that they do many more functions in other states, same vendor. For example, the ability of kiosks to issue a replacement driver's license would save thousands of field office visits a year, as 1 million Californians lose their driver's license a year, and they end up visiting a field office to have a replacement. The strike team is also working on a pilot project to bring the DMV to major companies in the state in order to help their employees get a real ID. This pop-up DMV is aimed at state's business travelers. With advance notice and coordination, employers could prepare employees to pull together required documents for the real ID, bring them to work on a designated day, and complete the entire application process at their work location in minutes. We have the first pilot scheduled for HealthNet here in Sacramento region for later this month. If it is successful, we hope to have many more large corporations throughout the state involved in our DMV pop-up plan. We also want to make sure people can get appointments at the DMV when they need them. That is why I have met with the Chief Operating Officer of Qmatic, the DMV's appointment vendor, vendor to improve the processes and to escalate and resolve issues and make modifications to prevent individuals and companies from making multiple appointments. We also are going to examine the communications around Real ID. We want to make sure that those whose licenses are expiring between now and October 1, 2020 know that they need a Real ID if they intend to fly or enter a secure federal facility or do not have a valid passport. Just as important as knowing whether a Real ID is needed is knowing what document to bring with them to the field office. Our goal is to have one visit only in order to get a Real ID. That means we need to communicate clearly about what every person needs to bring with them, and in some cases, such as when there has been a name change, it can be extremely complicated. Until now, DMV has created all of the messaging and materials around Real ID in-house without the benefit of knowing whether the messaging is resonating at a targeted audience. This is why the strike team is asking for funding for a major outreach campaign. The strike team interviewed vendors with experience running national and statewide campaigns. We talked to our colleagues at Covered California and Complete Count Census 2020 office about the scale and scope of their current marketing and outreach efforts on statewide campaigns. Research is critical, and we expect the campaign to use a number of standard and custom tools to assess these different market segments and leverage people who are influential in those segments to help spread our message in a way that resonates with specific segments of the community. We want a comprehensive campaign that is both effective and efficient. The deadline for getting the Real ID, well stated, October 1, 2020, happens to fall in the thick of the general election when media buys are at a premium. To measure success, we will gauge awareness with a pre-campaign survey and then follow it up with a post-campaign survey to assess it. We also want to increase our communication around Real ID by establishing booths at the major California airports to provide information and answer questions around Real ID and other DMV services. The strike team and DMV are working with TSA on the placement of these booths now. In another effort to reduce the number of customers visiting field offices to complete tasks that could be done online, we are talking to vendors about modernizing the DMV's approach to authenticating customers' ID online services. Currently, DMV's customers can confirm their ID online for driver's license and identification card applications. This service could be extended to streamline the Real ID application process by allowing DMV customers to upload and store required documents before going into the field office or while waiting in line. The goal is to ensure that customer has a complete application and required documentation when visiting a field office, and that the process can be completed quickly, avoiding return visits. The field office technician would only need to verify the customer's documents. This could significantly improve the transaction times. This identity authentication will be seamless to the customer, and customers will no longer need to remember a login or a password to use online services. Currently, DMV's identity management requires customers to enter the last 4 digits of their SSN. This change will allow more customers the ability to access and use DMV's online services. DMV estimates that there are 3.6 million customers who use online transactions requiring a login annually. And as we look toward DMV of the future, the strike team is looking to put out a request for quote to develop workplace strategies, analytics, and use retail design to provide the basis of a new design that will optimize the movement of people to a more functional architectural design, a DMV indeed of the future. Finally, we believe there must be a comprehensive change in how the DMV works. The strike team and DMV have engaged McKinsey & Company to help DMV focus the start of its cultural change on improving customer experience around Real ID. They have been asked to undertake a series of 3 related design sprints focusing on communications, employee training, and field office activities for issuing Real IDs. Embedding DMV employees into the process is essential to getting it right and key to teaching staff new ways to redesign outmoded processes quickly. Last week, McKinsey made 3 field office visits, and planned to visit another dozen in different parts of the state. McKinsey sent out a survey to learn about Real ID market segments and what motivates decision-making. They are analyzing field office data from DMV as well as field office observations from site visits, including the mapping of customer journeys through the field office. They will use these elements and others to start developing prototypes for improved field office customer flow. They will then test and refine. Similar prototyping sprints for communications about Real ID and training for the field office employees will result in better prepared customers, better trained employees, and a reduction in time that transactions take. This will help the field office to handle the expected increase in customers seeking Real IDs and ensure that customers who lack the required documents don't wait in line only to learn that they aren't prepared once they get to the counter. While all of the McKinsey's work is focused on the processing surrounding Real IDs, these lessons are user-researched, using prototypes to test new approaches and focusing solution on customer needs, will cascade and translate to other key DMV functions. Another key area that both the strike team and OSAE, why do I say OSAE? Excuse me, audit found lacking is training. Training materials are out of date, and while DMV sets aside an hour for training each week, it is unclear how well this time is used and how effective it is. The lack of robust training is why we are organizing a training stand-down day this summer. For one day, we will close DMV offices to provide comprehensive, uniform training in all field offices. I know that this is a significant investment, but I think we need to do something significant to make clear to our DMV employees how important their work is to the state and indeed to their customers. I hope this has given you an idea of what the strike team has been doing. I believe we've made some significant progress and are on a path to make meaningful improvements to the DMV. And of course, I'm very happy to take your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you want us to go next?
Please.
Okay. I don't think this is on. Is this on? Good afternoon. My name is Jennifer Whitaker, and I'm from the Office of State Audits and Evaluations. And also with me is Marilyn Standing Horse, who is the manager on the assignment. And we're going to give you a. I don't think it's on.
I know, it doesn't.
So thank you for the opportunity to invite us to this hearing so that we can provide a brief summary of our DMV audit results. As you know, in September of 2018, at the direction of Governor Brown, Finance began the performance audit of the DMV. We issued our report in March of 2019, and we had two audit objectives when we began the audit. The first audit objective was to assess the efficiency and effectiveness of DMV's operations and make recommendations to improve their practices and enhance the field office customer service. And our second objective was to evaluate DMV's IT system and its impact on the field office customer service. Both objectives were around the customer experience. While performing our audit, we interviewed over 170 employees at DMV's Sacramento headquarters and field offices, ranging from the former director of DMV to motor vehicle representatives in the field offices. We evaluated over 300 responses received via our website. We had an employee or customer form online where people could come in and provide anonymous feedback to us. And we also observed operations from the customer and employee perspective at 30 field offices throughout California, wherein staff were went in they were unannounced. They were not an auditor on the particular day when they went in. The audit manager will now share the results of the both objectives.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Marilyn Standing Horse, Department of Finance. As described in our audit report, DMV operations are not always efficient and effective in delivering services to their customers. Many opportunities exist to improve DMV's practices and enhance the field office customer experience. Our audit report results are organized into two chapters, one for each of our audit objectives. Each finding is accompanied by detailed recommendations that are focused on the opportunities that DMV has to enhance their governance structure and organizational culture with regard to their operations and IT. I will now present a summary of those findings. Our first audit objective on DMV operations and the field office customer experience resulted in 7 findings as follows. Finding 1, there were significant deficiencies in planning and implementation of the Real ID program. These included an inconsistent approach for planning for Real ID in the decade leading up to implementation, delayed prioritization of the related IT project until 2017, and missed opportunities to redesign policy for the frequency that customers require DMV services. The second finding is that DMV operates under an outdated organizational and reporting structure. For example, field office grades, which determine the size and resource needs of field offices, were last assessed statewide in 1990. Furthermore, regional office oversight over field offices is inconsistent, and DMV's internal communication structure to field offices is inefficient, in part due to field office employees not having a DMV email access. Our third finding is that DMV's staffing and budgeting approach is not focused on maximizing field office capacity. On average, 30% of field office windows were closed and therefore not assisting customers during our observations. In addition, long-term reliable data on field office absenteeism was not readily available. Also, DMV does not have an effective process to allocate positions to field offices to effectively handle their customer demand. Our fourth finding is that appointment practices need improvement. Specifically, DMV's appointment system allows for differences in appointment availability throughout the state and the reservation of duplicate appointments. Our fifth finding is that statewide monitoring of the field office customer experience needs improvement. Initiatives such as the Command Center and Lean Six Sigma team were untimely implemented with regard to the summer 2018 wait times, and these groups could do more to improve the customer experience. Also, DMV's internal audit unit does not audit customer service related topics. Our sixth finding is that the field office customer service tools such as line triaging, accurately tracking and advertising customer wait times, and tablet and text notifications were inconsistently implemented. Our seventh finding is that field office employee training and resources are inadequate. For example, more than 20% of employees from the offices we visited had attended neither a driver's license nor vehicle registration training. Our second audit objective and the second chapter of our report focuses on IT's impact on the field office customer experience, and that section has three findings. The first finding is that there are insufficient network infrastructures and lack of network monitoring processes, which contributed to field office outages. Also, DMV's prioritization and resolution of IT issues needs improvement. The second IT-related finding is that the Real ID IT project did not follow IT industry standards with regard to prioritization, resolving project defects, testing, and documentation. And the third finding is that DMV's use of legacy computer programming languages contribute to their succession planning risks. Without addressing the audit findings and recommendations of our report, DMV will continue facing challenges in efficiently and effectively delivering services to its customers. We've requested a detailed corrective action plan from DMV, which is due in May, describing their planned actions to address these findings and our corresponding recommendations. Our plan is to monitor their corrective action plan progress. Once again, thank you for inviting us to share and discuss our results with you today. We're happy to answer any questions you have regarding these results.
Thank you. Any questions? Ms. Smith?
So thank you for those presentations, but unfortunately, not unlike the first panel, what I'm not hearing, to my colleague from Orange County's point earlier, is, and perhaps that's part of the audit correction suggestions, but a system by which the most critical deficiencies are met in a timely manner, metrics for meeting those most critical needs to try to right this ship, and then what the timeline for that work looks like. Because what I am hearing is we understand there are myriad concerns that need to be addressed, but very often institutionally when you go to address all of those all at once, you're accomplishing relatively nothing, and it takes a very long time to do that. And so I think, and I've heard consistently from this committee over and over again, what does the timeline look like? What are those measurable metrics? When can we expect to see it?
I'll speak regarding the audit. Our corrective action plan, which is due 60 days from the audit issuance, which will be around May 26th. We've requested that DMV include milestones, timelines for each of our recommendations and findings.
Great. One, thank you, Secretary Badger, for your comments. Appreciate the acting director for your comments. Just going back to audit, the audit team, thank you very much for your very comprehensive audit. What's clear is that you paint a picture of an organization that has the inability to implement things implement projects, implement goals, implement the most basic of business processes throughout the organization in a consistent manner. Is that a fair characterization?
Yes.
So given that, it sounds like you don't just need milestones and dates, but you need a complete overhaul of the department. Because again, you know, this is unfortunately a repeat of the August hearing. We had a former director who came here. Everything that was said today was said in August. The big difference is the audit just verified exactly what we believed, that we didn't trust the implementation. We didn't trust that the resources would get to the field. The DMV staff who were here, because some were here in August, can attest to the consistency of the questions that we had and the consistency of the answers on behalf of DMV. But here's what was inconsistent, was what actually got put into action. So relative to other departments that you're auditing, where does this fall? Is it fairly consistent with other deficiencies, or is this, you know, with this scale, you know, on a scale of 1 to 5, with 5 being sort of the most concerning, with 1 kind of being sort of just a minor concern? Where would this fall in all the different audits that you do in the state?
Well, that would be a difficult question to answer because, like we shared at the beginning, our objectives were very narrow for DMV, and every time we go into a different state agency, we're looking at different things, different objectives. But to answer your question, there was some leadership that, you know, that I think the underlying message of the report is there was some leadership failures. And so I think that it is difficult for us to say, well, is their leadership better than someone else's leadership? It was at the time when we entered and we were looking at the processes and procedures that they had in place, that their improvements could have been made.
So given that situation, how do we ensure that implementation occurs from top to bottom? We have an acting director that came for us. She's been there for 2 months. How do we ensure actual implementation?
Again, a difficult question because generally the auditors go out, they provide a report, they cite what they see, but it is at the department's discretion to implement our recommendations.
So,
and we don't have any kind of teeth to say
no,
you didn't do it.
Right, but we do.
Yes.
So I guess the question is at this point there's a complete lack of confidence across the board in the department's ability to do what they say. So how do we ensure that can actually happen?
Well, if I may, Mr. Chairman, Governor Newsom is adamant that change will happen at the DMV, and he's starting off with the top, the leadership. And as I said, recruitment has begun for a new director. There are other vacancies, chief deputy director and other vacancies in the top leadership. The governor will ensure that the right motivated persons will be appointed, and they will be held accountable for not only the things that the strike team is developing, but also to, as you said, this extremely thorough audit that the Department of Finance did.
So I really appreciate the words that they will be held accountable, right? Here's what's missing. They'll be held accountable to what?
To making the many improvements that the audit has identified, the things that the strike force has identified and has already taken into account and is working on.
But here's the problem. Even in your own speech, and I gave you some latitude because it was a little bit long.
I apologize.
And also to the director's speech was excessively long. There were things that were missing. So here's what was missing was data, facts, timelines, benchmarks, performance measures. So I don't have anything to determine or to hold her accountable or the department accountable. There was no, we're going to reduce wait times by this much. This is how many customers we're going to serve. We're going to, it took 7 months to roll out Wi-Fi to the external area of one DMV field office. How many field offices are there for DMV?
172.
172. So based on that pace, how many years would it take to roll out every single one?
I don't think they will do them sequentially.
But again, this is
well taken.
But I'm just saying the point is, in August we discussed this issue. This was a major priority. How long are people waiting in line? We are assured we're going to figure out how to do this better, faster. So 7 months later, we found out only one in Carmichael has been done. So we don't even know how long people, so the wait times are down per the calculation, but we don't even really know the wait times are down because we don't know, again, the people in my area start waiting in line like at 5 a.m., at 6 a.m. So the 3 hours that they're in line before, maybe the 3 or 4 hours they're in line before the staff even get there, guess what? That's not counted. That's still time out of there. So I'm trying to be understanding, and unfortunately, I'm the only one left, so you just have me. But this budget request will not be approved by this committee as is. There are no measurements. You're asking for a 25% budget increase after this audit, which points out flaws to every single part of the department. On top of that, it doesn't even, and we haven't even got to aging infrastructure. So how can this proposal be brought forward in this fashion without any ways? So how is it that we're supposed to approve this with the trust us, we're going to do it? For $242 million? How can anybody ask for that with a straight face? I don't understand that. I'm a little bit in shock because we met yesterday in my office and said, okay, hey, we have a plan, we have a presentation. So again, no facts, no data, no plan. All I have is a line item, 2,000 people. I'm sorry, 2,000 people we need, right? Where are they going? What are they doing? The other part the audit mentioned was they're not even being trained. Are they going to be trained, the 2,000 people? Is there counter space at each of the field offices to do this? Are there enough computers for the 2,000 people? So what are these 2,000 people going to be doing?
I think the following panel is going to be addressing the budget request.
So let me just continue to go through my audit questions, if that's okay. So first, how do they resolve the planning and implementation issues? How does a department that doesn't know how to how to prioritize, how do you teach them how to prioritize?
So our recommendations, specifically for the example of the Real ID IT project prioritization, outline best practices that we have observed at other state entities regarding using metrics to prioritize projects and having consistency in how they do that.
Do you want to provide an example?
Sure. So our report findings and recommendations are all summarized in Appendix C of our report, which I believe was also an attachment to the agenda today. Towards the end, for finding 2.2A, we talk about reviewing how DMV prioritizes their projects and uses accepted scoring and ranking templates to do so. So we recommend that they have a systematic scoring system for their IT projects so that they can have a uniform method for prioritizing different things as they come across their to-do list. We also recommend that they refine their existing templates so that they align with that systematic scoring system. And we recommend that they use their Executive Governance Council to advise them on what projects are facing DMV.
So just to Secretary Batcher, so who on the DMV team has been assigned to this? There's an
To assign the answer to the audit?
Yes. No. The audit recommendation was to assign a dedicated team to ensure the implementation of Real ID, but also to make sure that proper prioritization of future projects is.
My understanding is Acting Director Webb has assigned already a team that is putting together the response to the audit. And I'm assuming it is our executive team, the council that was just referred to. I've asked her if they put a planning document together. I didn't ask who it had been assigned to.
Okay.
I should say to whom.
In terms of organizational structure, your recommendations in terms of how do you plan to have better alignment between central office and the field offices? What was the recommendation there?
So for organizational structure, we looked at the division and the spread of the regional offices that oversee the field offices. And as we say in the report, there are constraints on the geographical location of the regional offices and then the quantity of regional offices with respect to the field offices. There's 8 regions and over 170 field offices. So we recommend DMV analyze their makeup of field offices in addition to reassess the grading of field offices to make sure that they have the adequate level of support.
But the overall, I guess, just to step back, and I understand your audit was very specific, right?
Yeah.
But to step back, just the overall picture you painted was an agency somewhat under siege, for lack of a better word. An organization that is sort of on this assembly line, just doing stuff every day, but doesn't stop and actual plan and implement directives, or doesn't step back and actually think about kind of not what I have to do today, but what are some of the big things coming down the pike. So how do you get an organization like that to actually stop, not just do work every day, but actually sit back and plan?
Well, I think it goes back to the leadership that we talked about earlier, is that if they have a strong leadership guiding them through through this and their vision. So there was a disconnect between the Sacramento headquarters and the field offices. And so we recommended in our report that there be a better alignment of communication between those two. Go ahead, sorry.
How many people are in the Sacramento headquarters?
I do not have that number.
Approximately.
I'm going to guess 3,000. I really don't have that number either.
And of the 3,000, you said there's a leadership vacuum.
And there's a governance vacuum as well.
And how many people at the top are there?
Pardon?
how many people at the top?
On
So-
the-
so
in the
top of
deputy director
Yeah,
positions?
roughly, like what, 16, 20, 15?
Approximately
It has changed
12.
since we've been there, so.
Yeah,
I
but
have-
approximately like what, 12?
I believe there's 8 divisions, and so 8 deputy directors.
Okay,
over
so
the
8 deputies,
division.
plus you have a,
About 10.
Yeah,
and-
right.
And then there's some additional direct reports into the director's office, like public affairs and
Right.
so forth.
so we have a couple vacancies, I know that, right? But within there, there's still 2,985 people who are still there. So how do you have the people who have been disconnected from the field offices and reconnect them? Your answer to everything is leadership.
Well, it's very important.
I agree.
The captain of the ship has to run the ship, and if the
Agreed.
ship runs aground, it's the captain's responsibility.
Right, which is why my point is it's hard to do a 25% budget augmentation when there's not clear leadership, not clear responsibility, not clear benchmarks, not clear guidelines, not clear timelines, not clear. Right, this is not a policy committee, this is budget committee. And in budget committee, we prefer to do things in data. And what I heard today was a lot of talk, but not a lot of data or facts. So, so I'm going to excuse the auditors because we'll get to the next part. But again, really appreciate the audit. I think the audit was very, very well done, very thorough. Really appreciate your job. And I know the questions that are being asked, you are, obviously are not in the business of completely being able to answer all of them. But having said that, I think the audit paints a very clear picture of the deficiencies. I think what's not clear is who's going to, again, be accountable to correct them, and who do we have confidence in to appropriate the resources and give the, who's going to be there to restore the public trust. So thank you.
Thank you.
We'll go to panel 3 now. Oh, not the.
Thank you. I wasn't sure I was still on that.
Thank you. If you can feel free to, Director Webb, you can feel free to begin, or Secretary Badger.
So, good afternoon, Chair and members. Again, Kathleen Webb, Acting Director, and I would pose a question. I can go into a high-level summary unless you would like to go into questions in the essence of time.
You can do a very brief high-level summary if you wish.
All right. So for the current year, 2 requests have been submitted to the Joint Legislative Budget Committee pursuant to Provision 2 of the Budget Act of 2018 to augment DMV's fiscal year 2018-19 budget. That amount is $46.4 million to prevent increased wait times and really address immediately the Real ID demands that we have. The authority would fund current year costs associated with increased hours of operation, overtime, increased permanent PI hours, use of retired annuitants and staff borrowed from other departments, and staff training. This will also fund the early hiring of training 300 additional temporary positions being requested in the 1920 budget. Along with the early hiring, DMV is requesting $1 million in current year for an in-service training day, which is essential to basically baseline and have everybody on the same page with regards to implementing Real ID. And is also based on recommendations in coordination with the GovOps strike team. This will be critical to ensure, I think, that consistency of delivery that you've been all talking about. The budget year total request is for $225.9 million to fund $178.8 permanent, address short-term challenges along with long-term operational improvements. The administration's proposal balances immediate needs for temporary resources to address Real ID with the available resources, but also really addressing what I call systemic and infrastructure issues that we have to address at DMV. In response to the Office of State Audits Evaluations Performance Review and the GovOps DMV reinvention team, the proposal includes funding for the number of long-term improvements that will transform DMV for the better. These needed customer improvements will include accepting credit card payments in field offices, which will make transactions faster and easier. It also includes passing on the credit card transaction fees to the customer, similar to the Employee Development Department and the Franchise Tax Board, which will reduce overall expenditures for the DMV and generate budgetary savings of $114 million in the motor vehicle count for over the next 5 years. The redesigning and streamlining of the DMV's website is really essential, and it will make it easier to complete transactions online and will reduce unnecessary field office and visits. Inclusive in the request is something as simple as an email address for customers to make inquiries, something you would think we could do already here in California, but will also require resources for DMV to appropriately staff and be responsive to. The proposal will also fund a number of operational improvements besides training, increase regional management, improve oversight of the field office operations to monitor performance, ensure the training is implemented consistently. We also want to bring a consultant in DMV to address the governance structure desperately needed at DMV and to look for ways to better coordinate and manage resources across the organization. My goal also with regards to this request is to establish a performance management environment that includes key performance indicators that are tied to strategic plans and the operating goals that we are trying to achieve. In addition, we are seeking $1 million for a vendor to help redesign and streamline the DMV field office for the future. We then would conduct a field office to pilot that DMV office of the future. As discussed previously, plans to expand transactions that customers complete on its website and self-service terminal kiosks so customers do not need to visit a field office. And the request also provides for critical information technology improvements, including replacement of outdated, unreliable hardware, such as terminals, servers, and circuits, and expanded network redundancies to stabilize our infrastructure. DMV believes the customer outreach and education is a key component. I know I'm running out of time. The proposal includes $9.5 million for communication campaign for various media channels aimed at reducing wait times to better perform and inform the public. I think at the end of the day, I just want to reassure that there are some short-term needs that absolutely need to address Real ID, but there are truly some long-term systemic and infrastructure issues that we're also addressing.
Thank you. Finance?
Briefly, since this is a budget committee, I'd like to address a numbers issue. The agenda does say $242 million. That is the total ask with MVA. The $225 that the director reference is also accurate when you take into account the reduction from other funds related to passing through the credit card fees. So there are many numbers around this proposal depending on which aspect you are looking at. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else from the panel? Questions from the committee? Ms. Smith?
So I have a question which leads over from the prior panel and now with acting director and the head of the strike team here. You know, the environment I come from is public education. I served 9 years on a school board. And over the last decade, public schools have undergone tremendous state-mandated transformation. We've gone to a new Common Core set of standards. We've implemented smarter balanced assessment testing, which meant that every student had to be able to have a piece of technology in their hand in order to be able to do those assessments in a very short time window that was provided to school districts. Districts rose to that challenge in a diminished funding environment, right? There is not enough school funding to really resource what all of the needs are. And so I'm left at the end of these 3 panels of conversation saying, is the leadership change that's needed a devolving of DMV leadership to the local level? Does it make more sense at this point to shift this responsibility to local leadership and institutions where there's a direct relationship to the constituents being served and therefore a real-time need to actually make these changes happen? Because I am just being here in the few hours that I've been here today and the few months that I've been in the Capitol, the DMV is my single biggest frustration, and I'm a problem solver. And I'm still not hearing a couple of hours in how we're going to solve this. I hear a reframing of what the issues are, but I am not hearing a roadmap for how we fix it. And in many cases, when you're talking about good government service, the best model to provide that is local governance. So share to me your concept of what a new governance structure looks like, because I want some measure of accountability in my district that I can go to directly now to get these questions answered.
You want me to address that for now, and you may have some thoughts you want to share? So, great question. And one of the things I will tell you that, if you're familiar with it, I am a big advocate of what they call the balanced scorecard. And it sounds like the schools were actually implementing something along those lines. And when you look at any organization, you have to look at who are your customers, what are the primary goals for serving your customers, and then what are the metrics you need to be putting in place. And then you need to look at the structure to ensure you have what I call a horizontal enterprise focus of how you're going to achieve it. Because one of the things I find interesting in government is the programs get going, but there is sometimes they don't feel like they're actually on the same team together. And part of what I need to do is at DMV is make sure there's a clear understanding of our mission, our vision, our customers, the goals we're all trying to achieve, the role that everybody has and aligned with those goals, even though they may have an administrative responsibility or a facilities management responsibility. How do those goals align with actually delivering service to our customers? But it all starts with a strong enterprise governance team. And so that would be the executives, the deputies, all aligned and measuring and holding each other accountable, because I also think it's holding each other accountable to achieving the goals. But I think even most importantly, you've all stressed this, and I completely agree, and I know the Secretary agrees as well, is we do need to put out a performance management report. Now, I know that we've been putting out a report on a monthly basis that talks about the initial wait times and things like that. I would offer, and I've talked to some of the budget staff, that we revisit the report that we give to you on a monthly basis, and that we agree to what are the key performance measures that we need to be focused on to address the most pressing issues, but also assure you good stewardship of the funds that you are actually giving to us. I oftentimes tell my staff, to those who are given much, much is expected, and I think you have a fair request to expect us to report to you on those efforts. What I will tell you, it's a culture that's existed for a long period of time in the way that it currently operates. So what I do and what we go in with the GovOps strike team isn't going to just turn it around on a dime. There's going to have to be a full effort that addresses workforce development, that addresses business process development, that addresses technology transformation, in addition to really kind of thinking about what is the business model for the DMV going forward. I don't know if it incorporates what you've brought up, but I think there's some good discussions we can have as what is the right business model for DMV in California on a go-forward basis. Secretary Batcher, I don't know if you want to.
No, I agree with what you've said, and I also agree, Mr. Chairman, that metrics and some benchmarks are extremely important and needed. We have been looking at a larger organizational review at the strike team. We have left the operational statistics we knew the audit would be forthcoming on those things, as well as the DMV. But I do agree that metrics are extremely important, and we'll come forth with them, with the metrics that we need. The governance structure, both specific in certain areas of DMV, the IT area in particular, as well as the overall executive team, is lacking and has been lacking. I can't address the reasons as to why, but we have to address going forward fixing those things. And having the right leadership is extremely important, as we have stated, as well as the right structure that indeed does take into consideration. Those field offices are critical. They are small little cities unto themselves. Do they have the right structure? As I think Acting Director Webb said earlier, all of the field offices are extremely different in when they've been built. I mean, the Phil office in San Francisco is extremely different than the Daly City, than those that are more modernized. They lack training rooms. They haven't been studied in terms of the movement of people through them. One of the things that we've been working with McKinsey on is how do you operate within this space, and when the space is very different, you have the people waiting in line. If they have chairs there for them, they're literally sitting there looking at the functioning of DMV, the inefficiencies before them, windows open and so forth. We really have to look at how people flow through these offices and come up with a much better and more efficient plan for all of the DMVs, if you will. But local control is extremely important, and our concern is, as we've stated earlier, are the technicians getting the proper training? Do we have the proper structure in terms of have the regions allocated properly? Are they, as the audit well indicated? I think Colleen's looking very closely through that and to that. I think the audit pointed out well that the regions and the DMV field offices haven't been looked at since 1990. Well, we advanced greatly in how we perform work. Have those processes that they perform been looked at? Those are things we have to have done now.
Ms. Petrie-Norris.
I think one recurring theme in our conversation has been, I think, some concern about a lack of a clear roadmap and a seeming lack of clear deliverables. So just going back to, I think we talked about 5, or like I'm taking away that there's like 5 high priority projects: Real ID, overall tech remediation and redevelopment, online, call centers, and kiosk rollout. I think those are the 5. So for each of those, is there right now today a documented project plan that you would be able to share with us for each of those 5 projects?
So we do have a plan, and I think what I would offer is I think we owe you probably a more formalized plan around what we're doing and the timelines around those things. For each of the things that you've identified, I have individual plans that we're working through. I think it's kind of bringing them into probably a DMV report that kind of holistically brings those things together.
I'm fine with like a Gantt chart. I like a Gantt chart.
Right.
We like Gantt charts too.
Yeah,
So.
I agree. I can speak at least to the one of the areas as an example, the kiosks. I've met with the vendor, the ITI, and asked them not only for a communications plan, which they have put together, but for a review of their methodology. How do they decide where kiosks go? Review of their methodologies, and a plan as to where they would put the 100 that we've asked for, as well as the plus 100 that we hope to have out in the field by the end of the year. And I understand, Colleen, that they are putting that together. So that is a plan for the kiosks, both a recheck of their methodology, where best do we place these kiosks, a review of whether they're appropriate still to have more in the DMV offices, which drive traffic into the field office, which is, again, not one of our goals. So that is one of the plans around the kiosks as an example.
Okay. Yeah, and I won't speak. I won't speak for the budget committee or the chair, but I think that. Yes, very clear plans with clear deliverables for each of those 5, I think would go a long way to getting people comfortable with, making additional investment, or at least being able to make an assessment if that's appropriate.
Mr. Fong.
Just some quick questions. Seeing that there are the states across the country are implementing Real ID, what states are doing it well?
Colleen, you just came from the national organization.
That's a fascinating question to ask.
I think Colleen just came from a national association meeting where this was much talked about.
Of motor vehicle administrators around the country.
Sure. No, I'm all ears to try to understand. I mean, we have 50 different states, 50 different DMVs. Who's doing it well?
That's a tough question.
I try not to ask too easy questions.
No, I love it. Had a lot of contact with the state of Indiana. I feel like that they've really done it well. They have, as Secretary Batcher said, and Acting Director Webb, their primary goal has been to really get folks out. Do not come in if you don't have to. They've developed some wonderful Connect centers, very similar to a Capital One Cafe. Very high-tech Silicon Valley, where you can go in. It's manned by one person, and it's got kiosk in the wall, and you can do all different types of transactions. So I think they do that well. Their website is fantastic. I attended one of their conferences on call center. It's call center centricity. We've shared that with our communication programs division. I think that they've all done, I think Indiana has done a fantastic job. But I also think that we learn from the other states as well. So we've got our friends in Texas who are mandatory Real ID, learning from them about your vendors, your queuing system. How do you triage people? So I think that we learn from all different sources, but from my particular, I think Indiana does it very well.
I'd echo the review that we've made of different states as a strike team. Indiana has done some superb things. Years ago, they offloaded, if you will, their vehicle registration outside of field offices. So they've made some statutory changes to what a field office is utilized for. The office that Colleen was just referring to is very much a DMV of the future. One of the things that we hope to look at are with the RFQ that we are putting together. And it's a 24/7 DMV that, as she described, you have kiosks and in-the-wall services like an ATM, and one person can staff this. And it looks like, frankly, an Apple store. It's a very inviting environment, and people can use it at 1 a.m. in the morning or 1 p.m. in the afternoon.
So are we looking, I guess, to move in that direction as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So, and so that is part of the discussion, I guess, in this plan that we're going to get is that long-term vision of these kiosks and I mean, I'm guessing that we don't need all the additional temporary staff. We're utilizing technology. Am I correct?
Well, doesn't happen overnight, but yes, one of the things that the strike team is looking at is not only a Indiana-like 24/7 service DMV, but a whole new design DMV where people are serviced or people are served and people flow through an office in a much new modern way and are serviced in terms of how they are either utilizing the technician, how they're utilizing things like self-service.
Sure.
So we have, one of the proposals is indeed for a RFQ to have a vendor put indeed that plan together for a future DMV.
So what's your timeline? I mean, there are vendors, I'm sure, that could do registrations, that could do renewals, we could do 2-year license renewals, so where the folks don't have to come in every year. Now, what is your timeline? I mean, in terms of
specifically for what we're talking about the DMV for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I'm guessing.
RFQ will hit the street next week.
Well, for everything. So, I mean, I'm guessing you're going to triage what you got, or you're attempting to, and then you're going to do, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 priorities, trying to get to at some point. I think that for us in the legislature, we think too short term. So let's go out 20 years and work backwards. So how fast can we get there? As what are the milestones that you have? I mean, I'm just trying to kind of pull some information from you in terms of how do you envision changing the DMV, modernizing the DMV, and how fast can we get there?
Well, with the proposal that we have in the governor's budget and the appropriation that we're asking for, some of the things in terms of the modernization and the things that we can do will depend on, of course, the resources that we have. In terms of DMV of the future, that's something hopefully that we have absolutely opportunities to, with new leases coming due, with some legislation that was passed several years ago that allows DMVs to actually consider transferring and exchanging land. I think San Francisco is one in the legislation, Rancho Cucamonga and San Diego, and that's again a plan that could be implemented literally in the next year. There are many more timeframes that the most important thing that I think not the most important, but a very important roadmap is what will be due at the end of May, and that is the roadmap to implement the audit. And that will have matrix, that will have timeframes, benchmarks, and that will be due, and the acting director will make sure that that's done in a timely way.
And that plan, though, is phased or overlaid with the long-term vision, right? I mean, it's like I'm sure Mr. Frazier would appreciate this example where you have nothing frustrates my constituents more when someone's trying to build a road and so they build a sidewalk and they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to build a sidewalk, and all of a sudden they fix the road, so they tear up the road, and they tear up the sidewalk they just built, and then rebuild the whole thing all over again. So are we going to put all this investment into all this structure and in these brick and mortar stuff, and then all of a sudden in 5 years your vision is not to have brick and mortar anymore. And then we're going to move out of these buildings, and we're going to create these brand new cool kiosks that's Apple Store related, and it's not going to be in the buildings that we use. And then all of a sudden it's not. Does it make sense? It's not layered.
And we're just
and there's no synergy.
These are examples. Certainly, we're not going to reinvent every DMV office in the next year or two, and 10 years from now when we have autonomous vehicles and we have fewer people driving, and maybe we're really turning a DMV in 20 years into an ID authentication shop and not something that deals with the vehicles. I mean, those are things we're not dealing with here, and certainly not contemplating in terms of the immediate plans. But we would never want to. Your example of spending money and tearing something up only to waste the taxpayers' dollar, obviously not.
I appreciate that. And I think that my original question, I think Assemblymember Smith is correct. Maybe there is new localized approaches, and then tying it into what other states are doing. I think it makes sense to me that we look at other states that are doing it very, very well, learn from the states that have failed. Probably I would probably say that our state has struggled, clearly. That would be the understatement of the day in terms of implementing Real ID. And so let's not recreate the wheel, but I think I share, as I said earlier, I share Assemblymember Smith's frustration in this, because it doesn't have to be this way. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier.
So, and I appreciate Secretary and the interim director coming in and talking to me yesterday about the vision of going forward. And again, I think one of the things that is troubling to me is, for the 7 years that I've now been here, and 4 years as the chair of transportation, I've had this expectation that we'd have results. And I've been told over and over and over, and we've thrown money at it. Promises made were never promises kept. And so I'm apprehensive about this agency because of the reputation in the past. Now, I do have some renewed excitement because of what you've shared with me yesterday and what you've obviously shared with this committee today. I appreciate the governor putting you in this place. Long overdue. But you and I, we talked about culture yesterday also. Morale, culture, and the expectation of the public. And I think Mr. Patterson was kind of spot on when we talked about the ability to say, when I make an appointment with AT&T, they tell me between 8 and 12, okay? And they usually show up at 12. Okay, so making a good faith effort, I think, is an honorable thing. Reasonable expectations have to be implemented. But we also talked about cross-training of staff. I don't want an empty window. If somebody calls in sick, I want somebody to be able to man that, or woman that window, so that we can have an opportunity to provide every transaction. You talked about mobile pop-ups. Right now, we don't have capacity for transactions. People are waiting in line. We closed a few, I don't remember the number, but we closed some DMVs in the past. And I don't think it was a lot, but there were windows that would have been capacity. I want to see a bigger move towards accommodating in some kind of modular fashion the rural areas where you have targeted habitual problems of getting people serviced. But I think accountability to me is the biggest factor. I don't think we're getting enough real-time information back on a regular basis. Now every month now has been, it's been a refreshing thing, and I read that report. And again, I'm trying to hold back bills, as you asked, because of the onerous fashion it would take the agency right now, so that you're not impounded with a bunch of other expectations. That being said, I mean, you know, I know you're asking for a lot of money to be able to fix this. And we talked about my responsibility, not only as the DMV, as the policy chair, but I oversee the Highway Patrol, OTS, and Caltrans in my fashion. And I asked for $100 million last year from the Highway Patrol because we're very short in officers. We're 1,000 officers down. And I was denied, it was vetoed. And we're up 27% in deaths. So at some point in time, we've got to make a decision about priorities. I appreciate that we can get an economy of scale with a lot of efficiencies that are put in place, but I can't support additional money because promises have not been kept up to date. My expectation is to save lives at this point in time, and if I can do that, I just had an officer killed in Riverside. Okay, I don't have enough Highway Patrol's officers on the road. It's $100 million to do that. So I think we have an expectation of balance, but, you know, again, show me that you're going to be able to do it and keep it in, because this has been a revolving door. That you can keep it rolling, and then I'm more apt to be looking at other resources for revenue for you outside of the MVA or in your capacity, like we talked about yesterday, your capacity to raise revenue in other areas. But I have so many other needs in the MVA that I can't see this happening right now. It's not for me. And I appreciate the willingness to bring this back in this discussion. You've evolved. You have evolved, and you have taken this agency to another place that I think it can be successful. But I'm always afraid of that digression, how it digresses.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. Ms. Petrie-Norris?
I just had one quick question. I think Mr. Fong briefly touched on it, but there was an article today in the LA Times on the motor voter rollout. Wanted to just see if you had any reactions to that article, if you'd like to comment on some of those findings.
Well, first I will assure you that at DMV we take the motor voter responsibility in getting it right very seriously. We are committed to it. I will also tell you that we have been in constant conversation with the Secretary of State to improve the process. We meet on a weekly basis with the Secretary of State to look at process improvements and make sure we're getting records over to them that they can actually handle. I think the other thing that's going to be helpful is the Ernst & Young audit that was commissioned by the Department of Finance. And so I'm looking forward to receiving that audit. They're still in our office right now doing some assessments. But I think all of that coming together will be very helpful in making decisions going forward. I anticipate some of the findings may not be different than the Department of Finance audit either. I do fundamentally believe governance is a really important piece. I know we've repeated that on numerous occasions. But I think if you look at any healthy organization and any private sector organization, nonprofit, or even in the state, it usually starts with a really good, strong enterprise governance structure at the top. And it deals with the breaking down of silos. DMV is rich in silos. And what I'm trying to do is break down those silos so there is a horizontal coordination of activity and efforts that are being addressed. And that's a cultural change. I think Assemblymember Frazier addressed the culture piece and the morale, and folks are feeling a little beaten down and trying to do the best they can with the resources they have. And what I need to do, and my kind of my message to people is I want to move from maintaining our grandparents' DMV to creating our children's DMV. And because they all know their children would not like going into the DMV that exists today. But we all collectively have to be on that road together. And I really like the idea of kind of a visioning session that doesn't have to be just us by ourselves. But what does the future DMV look like? And Indiana certainly is a model for us to take a look at. On the motor voter, getting back to that piece, I would tell you there's been great progress since the research associated with that article. We do have a governance structure in place. One of the things I am putting together is a motor voter program. It's not a project at DMV, it's a program, and we need to staff it as a program appropriately. It touches many of our program areas, and so I'm working through establishing really a permanent program, understanding the FTEs, and the PYs that would be necessary to go ahead and support that program on a go-forward basis. It has been a resource demand, but I also say that we haven't been as efficient as we could be in how we manage it, so we're also doing a lot of process improvement in a number of the areas around motor voter.
So do you think any further inquiry would be warranted kind of based on some of the issues that that article pointed to? Or do you feel like that is already underway?
I think the Ernst & Young assessment will be revealing as to what they found, and then I think this body certainly has the ability to make a determination going forward.
Okay, so Ernst & Young, TBD. Got it.
So, Mr. Patterson.
I don't know if this has been addressed. Has anybody asked, what is your vision for the 21st century DMV? If you could do the Etch-a-Sketch, turn the mistakes upside down, and design the DMV of the future, do you have a sense of what it would look like?
Well, as you and I think discussed yesterday, and we talked a little bit earlier about some of the ideas around the DMV of the future, one being a 24/7 self-service DMV, but no lines, people moving freely through an office in a streamlined manner, with understanding of where their service, where they can go to get the service they need in a very easy and thoughtful way, like an Apple store, for instance, a pleasant environment, an environment that's clean, efficient, one that serves everyone that is there to be served in an effective way. Again, you mentioned Amazon type of services, and we talked about an Apple store. I've talked to the architects actually that have designed, the original designers of the Apple store. I'm hoping that they can be engaged as one that perhaps answers the RFQ. So those are sort of some of the ideas that we have had. I wish we could have an Etch-a-Sketch and start over, but I think you noted, sir, earlier, well, that there are thousands, millions of transactions that the DMV in its current state have to continue to do every day while we are looking and making in real-time changes now, but still looking forward to making more changes. We're still dealing with a very aged and unstable infrastructure in their IT. We're dealing with an under-resourced technicians in the call centers, and indeed even at the windows. So those are things that we have to contend with and deal with now while we're looking at making that DMV of the future much more effective.
Don't know if this is apt or not, but when you think about what we're doing with respect to this building, right? We have to operate in it, and so we're building something over there. We're going to go over there, right?
Yeah.
And then this gets fixed. I mean, the big challenge here to me and the new one is you got to keep the thing going for this, even if it is herky-jerky, and then bring it down, and then turn it on and bring up the new one. We're doing that with this building. Can you do it with the DMV? I love the aspirational approach that you've taken on it, and I think I mentioned that to you a couple of times. I appreciate it. I do.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So just to get back to this year's budget request. So January of 2019 as well as March of 2019, you had a $40.4 million request. $6 million request. Those requests were not approved by JLBC because we were waiting for this hearing. Has that money been spent?
And the initial $40.4 million, that when that request went over, in regards to working with the wait times and everything along those lines, when that request went over in January, we had notated that there was, at that point in time, $17 million that had been spent to date, and that the projection was from January through June that another $22 million was going to be spent. And so we're now at a point, since we're in April, that, yeah, that the money is continuing to get spent.
Okay, so the money hasn't been approved, but you're spending in deficit.
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay. So the reason the money was not approved, because we were waiting for this hearing in hopes that we would hear, the work that had been done, as well as the plan for the future. So what we got in this hearing was the work that was supposed to be done, which didn't get done. We did get a plan for the future. All we have is just numbers and bodies where these were numbers and bodies, and that's it. So at this point, I still can't authorize, at least for our house, to approve this money.
So just to tag into on the JLBC request, and I'll defer to finance as well, is obviously the point of the provisional language was to assist with wait times. And so with the JLBC, that was to bring the wait times back down to at least within our goals.
Right, but we just discussed the wait time information you have weighed is not accurate. I said earlier, you were probably in the back of the room when I said this, but again, I have people that get in line at 5 a.m., at 6 a.m. Their 3-hour or 4-hour wait time is not taken into account.
Correct, and then unfortunately, there's really going to be no way for us to track that until someone's in the office.
Right. You have the director start off by saying when you talk to people, people prefer to come in first in the morning rather than later. Mm-hmm. So in essence, more people could be coming in earlier instead of later. They could just be deciding, hey, we're just going to get to 5 a.m. and go wait in DMV because just to get it over with. But we have we don't know the level of the accuracy of your data. Your data is not reliable.
So the wait time data that's in the monthly reports that we share with the legislature, excuse me, is those take into account the queue wait time, which is what we're all aware of in regards to when the queue ticket is given, and then they also take into account the pre-queue wait time. And so that's incorporated into both, but it does not take into account what you're saying is if someone is waiting at the office before the office even opens and there's nobody there, those wait times are not tracked.
So again, you have data that's not accurate. So the budget was conditional upon approval. We can't approve it. At this point, again, we've been asking for this information. We waited for the strike team. We waited for the audit. So I think what we do have is we have a clear evaluation of what the problems are. What we don't have is what do we do about it?
So if I may, so a number of items in the finance letter, and so the finance letter is broken up into sections, as was mentioned earlier, right? So the top section is associated with Real ID. That's pretty straightforward as it relates to that's a widgets count. We've talked about that before. Transactions, minutes, PYs. But then also in the request is a lot of the items that are identified per the OSA audit or per the strike team. And then the narrative of the funding request that actually breaks out as it relates to which items were which.
So you're talking about the April finance audit letter?
Yes.
I'm talking about the January and the March finance letters.
The JLBC notices. The whole point of the JLBC notices were primarily to maintain the wait times at an acceptable.
No, I understand what they were.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying. Those letters were not approved. That appropriation was not approved because there was a lack of faith in the department to execute what they said they were going to do. Now we have an audit that proves not only did they not execute it, they have a problem. They said they were going to do something, they didn't do it. the audit's very clear on that. We can go back and we can look at the August testimony. You were there. You're one of the few people who were there. So we can go back and replay that, but it's clear what was said was not done. So again, you're running a deficit now because January and March, the $46.4 million, not approved. So you're spending the money, but it's not approved. I don't know where you're going to get it from. And then you got an April finance letter. At this point, I'm saying as of this moment, based on the information we have today, I can't recommend approval of this proposal. I can't, I mean, again, there was no plan. There was no where this money is going to go, what it's going to be used for. All I have is a number of bodies. There was no how is this going to impact the work of the future. If you have plans in all the different areas, whether it's kiosks or whether it is staffing the field offices or the IT, great. We'd love to see it. I don't think we've ever said, hey, don't give us information, don't give us your plans. In fact, that's been the ongoing request from the committee, which we haven't received the information. The other point, just to go back, I mean, just to take a fine point on kiosks, again, as of February 28, based on your rough numbers, you know, every kiosk was seeing about 1,350 transactions, and then as of February 2019, you're seeing only about 1,100 transactions. So as you're deploying more kiosks, you're getting less usage per kiosk. So it's not even clear. The data doesn't necessarily support, oh, hey, well, we should be doing more kiosks.
No, I just want to chime. That is correct as it relates to as you roll out a new kiosk, it's really the adoption rate. And so the new kiosks, when they first go out, they don't have a huge uptick. It's a matter of making sure the community is aware. And so that's one of the big points as it relates to, I know that the strike team has mentioned.
Well, then we'd love to see the data on that. Again, I think we could always be persuaded by information, by facts.
We can get you as it relates to it.
So
all
if
152 as it
there is a
relates to.
slow uptick rate, that's fine. What's the slow uptick rate? How long does it take for it to take up?
Yeah, we can get you that. That's no problem.
No, how long? How does it take to take up?
I don't have that information directly with me.
3 months? 6 months?
I would say probably, depends on the location. For instance, as you may know, we have one in the library over here.
Approximately.
There's, I would probably say it's probably a good 6 months to a year. And because in theory, most of these individuals, they're going to use it, if it's vehicle registration, they're going to use it once a year.
But it is, sir, one of the reasons why I asked the vendor to review their methodologies and also put together a comprehensive communications plan, because we want to make sure that they are indeed advertised, marketed, and are in visible places and in high traffic places and in useful places. They have contracts with many other states, and they provide the same service in many other states, and indeed even greater transaction services.
Which is great. I think yes, finance.
I just want to respond to your comments, please, on the joint JLBC notification. As noted, if first of all, the administration has not yet received a letter back from JLBC saying it's not approved, right? This was a pause so that we could have this hearing. If we were to receive that, as noted in our January 3rd letter, when you ask where they're going to get the money, our letter indicated that without this augmentation, DMV is going to have to eliminate staffing, some of the overtime, some of the Saturday services, and they're going to have to reduce their base budget. And so that would have an impact if this funding is not approved. And I can only imagine the phone calls we will all be getting if that happens. With regards to, you said you could be persuaded by data. We're happy to provide the data that we can. We have been providing the monthly wait time reports, and as you note, we can track from the ticket, but not necessarily prior to that. And we would appreciate any suggestions as to how we can improve that report.
We're getting, if you're not getting any phone calls, we're happy to direct our phone calls to you because we're getting plenty. So I don't think we're going to get any more phone calls. And in fact, if you haven't visited a DMV, really, I think it's something you should all do at 6 a.m. in the morning, because that's something that I do. So if that is a threat, that's fine. I am, again, that's where we're at. And I think, let me just finish. So I think I say this to reiterate the lack of seriousness the department took upon this hearing. It was clear we were waiting for this hearing to approve this year's money and to get a sense of where we would be for the $242 million. The department did not come forward with a plan. They did not come forward with any specific information outside of a budget, right? But a specific deployment plan, how they were going to address the deficiencies that we know existed. Again, the audit just codified what we knew was already going on. So I appreciate that the auditors were able to codify in a singular document the problems. I don't think any of us were surprised. Anybody who's been in a DMV is not surprised by any of this information. So knowing that this information exists, now you have a document, so you have a roadmap. But again, clearly the department, the agency did not prepare for this hearing. This hearing's been on the record. You knew this was coming up for months. So again, we need a plan. We need clear delineation where the money is going, what it's going to be spent on. You can give it down to the field office. I don't care if you give it down to the computer. There's never been a time during which I've been chairman where I'm saying, oh, you've given me too much information. This is way too much data. Give it to me. If FAIR doesn't have time to review it, I have nothing but free time. I'd be more than happy to do it, right? I spent my weekend reading this audit cover to cover. I found it great. So just to commend the audit team. But the fact that the department did not show the committee the respect to put together a well-thought-out plan, a well-thought proposal, knowing that the two letters had not been approved and were being held for this hearing is very troubling, highly problematic. And the fact that money that was approved was spent and was not spent appropriately, again, per the audit, staff, money was spent, people weren't trained. Again, tablets were bought, not used. The text messaging. And again, these are just the highlight. We could go on. I could be here till Mr. Fraser's dinner's over, and we could just go down the list. But again, I think you get the picture. But again, I just want to reiterate that if the department does not bring forward, I am left with no choice but to inform our JLBC chair that we are rejecting the letter. And we will, and at this point, right now, the Assembly cannot include this appropriation request or the $46 million that you asked for this year in our version of the budget. So I don't know how any clearer I could be.
Very clear.
So when can we get the information we would like?
We can work with FAIR because there is, and it sounds like you need a little more detail than what's in the finance letter as it relates on page 23 that breaks out all the money.
I want to know where these people are going, field offices. I want to know how this is going to accomplish each of the goals that we're talking about. Yeah, I want to know what the plan is. I love the spreadsheet. Don't get me wrong. The spreadsheet's great, right? But it's not a plan. And under normal circumstances where you don't have the entire state in an uproar about the department's performance, we could have a discussion just based on the spreadsheet. These are not normal, well, unfortunately, these are normal circumstances, but they've been going on for too long. So that needs to change. This is not any different. I mean, we're having the same, this is like Groundhog Day. We're having the same hearing we had in August. It's extraordinarily, incredibly disappointing. I can't even tell you how disappointed I am. Because we discussed this in August. And we said, hey, we're gonna green light this letter. And we took grief in the press for green lighting this letter. And so not only did you not reward our faith, you demonstrated that we shouldn't trust the department to do what it says. So we're not making that same mistake twice. So you better come with an incredible amount of detail, where this is going, how's it going to be spent, who's going to be responsible. And then I want to know what people are responsible for it. Because the director's gone, but you're the deputy director in charge of the money. So let me ask you, how come tablets were bought but not used? You're the only one who was here in August.
Yeah, and I would say that tablets were utilized. Tablets were deployed out to 152 of the offices, then went out to all 172
Why
of the
weren't they being
offices.
used?
I think as it relates to, it's a consistency challenge, and some of the tablets may have been used in the automated knowledge test area, and not at the front area as it relates to after people take the automated knowledge test. We'll check them in and get them an appointment there.
So you're
there's
saying
different-
you have no way of knowing which tablets got used when?
Colleen, you do.
Me, I do not, but.
Yeah. We do have a way. So we have a mechanism where we can track the last time that the tablet was logged on, and we're working with our IT infrastructure to find out not necessarily where it was logged on, the time, the office,
Great.
and then
How many tablets have you used? Have you deployed?
there are, how many in total?
I think it was 500.
Yeah.
500. What percent are being used?
The last time that I got a report, it was 100 and about 128 tablets over about 78 offices. But I think there's one important thing to note, that a tablet may just be an office, maybe using one tablet, waiting for the other to charge. So I think that's important to note. In a smaller office, in a larger office, you can expect.
I don't know, it's silly. I charge my tablets overnight, but so, again, so of the 500, you had 172 tablets being used.
Approximately being used, yeah.
So what are the other 300 tablets doing, being charged?
That's what we're trying to remediate right now. What is the root cause? Why are they not being used? Is it a training issue? Is it, we're on that path. And I do want to talk about text messages
Please.
as well. So yes, we share your concern. Text messages are being underutilized. And we are working with Keymatic, as Secretary Batcher said, our vendor. We have the ability to find out how many text messages are sent out in a day or in a specific period of time, but we can't tie it back to the office. And that is the path that we're going down with Keymatic, to tie it back to the office for accountability. Who's doing it? When's it being sent?
You have 7,000 customers a day.
How many, I'm sorry?
You have 7,000 customers a day, right? We went back, no? How many customers do you have a day?
Many more than that.
7,000 a week? I'm sorry.
No,
Many more than that.
customers a day, anywhere
Yes.
between 70 and 80 to 85,000 a
Right,
day.
perfect. 70, 85,000, right? I apologize. How many text messages go out?
Last
A day.
Yesterday when I looked, we had about 25,000 that were sent out. But I do want to put a caveat in that. You have to hit a threshold in order for the text message to be sent out. So even though I may sign up for one, if my wait time doesn't exceed the time that the message would be sent out, so I think it's fair that we have a buffer in that formula as well.
And that's fine. But again, I think my concern is these questions are getting answered in Budget Committee with not as much detail as one I would like, but what it demonstrates is that there's not as much attention as we would like on these varieties of issues. Because when you, as a department, came forward in front of the Budget Committee last time, you said, these are the things that we are deploying. This is where we're spending the money, right? So then you hired, I forgot how many staff. You hired 900 staff, thank you. 900 staff didn't receive training.
They received training.
How many received training?
I believe the audit indicated that 20% of the folks that they had talked to had not. And you're right, looking back in perspective, we were hiring quickly. We had a large number of onboarding. We didn't have the appropriate number of training sessions that we needed. We're active, Robbie and I are working together to, part of that ask is for more trainers so that we can have that. But I think long-term, we need to think about different modalities. It can't just be this classroom didactic instruction. So we're looking at learning management. All of that is part of our ask, and I know it's a tough ask. I understand that.
Look, and we're happy to entertain the varieties of things, but the challenge is there's a complete lack of confidence that it will actually be implemented. Again, your acting director gave almost the identical speech that was given in August. Almost verbatim. So, again, all I can do is, this is what I heard last time we had this hearing. If we're getting the same result, that's completely unacceptable. So how do we ensure that we're going to get a different result?
Absolutely, we're going to assure you, we're going to have a plan, we'll have the statistics and the matrix and the benchmarking, Mr. Chairman, that you've asked for, and we will have a much more robust and more thorough reply. I'm a strike force person. I'm saying that on behalf of the.
Yeah, but with all due respect, Madam Secretary, I mean, I want to hear it from the three of them because.
And you should.
Again, the only person who said they were doing stuff, guess what? She's not here right now. So I'm looking at the three people from the department. How do we ensure this gets done? I mean, you heard the auditor. Okay, this is about leadership. This is about your team doing this. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm looking at the three of you. How did the three of you get this done? Plus your team. I'm still waiting for an answer.
So first, we're working on the corrective action plan, which will have some milestones. And I think you'll see some specific dates coming out with regards to the targeted activity that we're going to address.
And that'll be done by what date in May?
60 days, so we're looking at end of May, as that's going to be coming out.
So I would recommend you get it done before we close down our version of the budget, because if it's not done before then, if it's not done to our satisfaction, your appropriation I will guarantee it will not be in our version of the budget.
I would say secondarily, we have documents that supported this budget request, and we just need to go back and provide you the more detailed information with regards to the budget request. And so we will work with our partners in Department of Finance and with the staff that we're submitting the information and pull the detailed information for you.
So right now, this is Farah's busiest time of the year, so she may not have time to go through that level of detail, so I'll be reviewing that. Mm-hmm. And I don't really like to be going back and forth for more information. So my request to you is give me everything you got, and let's try to do it one time. Does that sound fair?
Sounds fair, and happy to meet and have further discussions.
And how soon can we have that?
When do you want it?
I wanted it today. I wanted it like a week ago so I can get ready for this hearing, so we could approve the $46 million you asked for. But we can't do that. I'm going to send a letter to JLBC tonight. So so that's when I wanted it.
Next week.
Yeah.
So it's
Next
late.
week.
We'll set up a meeting next week.
Okay.
Mr. Frazier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of the things when we were doing SB1 with Caltrans, the agency, when they were talking about the performance metrics and whatnot, we required them also, because they were going to get large sums of money to be effective, was that they had to provide us with $100 million in savings. Mm-hmm. I think in your plan, you also need to show where you're going to capture efficiencies and not just be spending large amount of monies to be capturing. So it has to be both ways. Mm-hmm. And again, as I mentioned before, we've been down this road before. We've been told that things were going to be accomplished. I'm disheartened that the information hasn't been provided as expected. But I think that one of the things my position as the policy chair is the level of service that my constituents deserve for the amount of money that we're spending, okay? And if I was to do a cash benefit analysis, I would look at another way to fund this. I would look at another way to man this project. Mm-hmm. I come from the private sector. I'm not getting a value right now. And so in that vein, we've also acknowledged some legislation that vendors were gaming the system on appointments. We're handling that. Making sure that that law is codified, because it's already law, but we're just making sure that we can try to make sure that it's an effective use of your appointment schedule for the constituents. You got to be more forthcoming to us. We have a responsibility, and as I've shared with you, I fully intend to go to your stand down with your employees and share with them my thanks, number one, but also hoping that they return the favor and work with us, that the constituents that come in have an expectation that they're going to be taken care of. And so, again, in solidarity with my chair, I'm there. I mean, just I have to be there, as I mentioned earlier. You're the face of government. I've said that before. And right now, we're not getting the value. And I just need some reassurances, because in other agencies, if their reports are late, there's no accountability. They just blow us off. And, you know, I think CARB has one that was due in December, and now they're telling me it's going to come in August. I needed that report so I could do a proper job as the chairman of judging legislation going through. They've tied my hands. So what happens is you're going to leave probably and go on to bigger and better things. And we've acknowledged that this job doesn't pay enough money. But we're left held in the bag. I've got 6 more years here.
Ms. Petrie-Norris.
I just had sort of one, I guess, final thought. I think a number of my colleagues have shared with you that DMV issues and DMV complaints are, kind of the top of the list in terms of district issues. I'm not sure if I mentioned this to you yesterday, but the Accountability Committee, we did a survey of district offices across the state. And it probably won't surprise you to learn that 81% of offices, DMV is either the number 1 or number 2 complaint. So we all know we've got a big issue. And I also know, and I want to acknowledge that I think both of you were brought in to try to right a foundering ship, and called upon at a time when perhaps the ship was sinking. So I do appreciate you stepping into that breach. I think I've got kind of, 3 requests, from my perspective. Number 1 is, like I said, a project plan for the top 5 projects we discussed. And in my mind, the gentleman from DMV, it's not a matter of more detail than this. It's something different than that. It's something that lets us go, are we actually on track to deliver these large-scale, big projects that historically we haven't actually been able to deliver? So that's one. Number 2, on the technology infrastructure side, I think we talked a little bit, and you said you had the 5-year technology plan. This probably isn't something you can do in the short term, but I personally think we have to be a lot more ambitious than, it sounds like we don't have 5 years to rebuild this platform, is what it sounds like to me. And then number 3, I would like to suggest or request a review of the motor voter program, and that perhaps is just the Ernst & Young audit that's already underway, but I would love to receive a copy of that so we can just make sure that there are no underlying issues there that also need to be addressed. So that would be my parting 3 requests as we move forward. Thanks.
Thank you. So I think just to summarize, we have a budget request that at this point is lacking. This is the complete definition of insanity. I'm going to quote our governor because he used this quote quite often when he was mayor. The definition of insanity, as we all know, is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So we're not going to make that mistake. So again, we're asking the DMV to take the feedback, to take the customer's feedback, to keep all these things. And I think what's sad is, and the toughest part for me is I just don't know if you in the central office really understand what is going on at the different field offices. Because when I'm there, and I'll tell you, and my colleagues will reiterate, I see a lot of hardworking people. They are working really hard. They got lines out the door. They're just trying to serve the people that are there, many of whom are very upset because of how long the lines are and things that are completely out of the control of the staff. And they do that every single day. And we can't sit here from our comfortable place in Sacramento and say that's okay to continue that. What you've put together as a plan demonstrates to me you're not listening to what's happening from our constituents, and you're not listening to what's happening in the field office. So when you put together a plan that says and demonstrates that you've heard us, because we've heard our constituents, we hear them. I go to the grocery store, I get this. I go out in public, I get this. I mean, you probably, none of you, I don't know, last time any of you were stopped in a grocery store to talk about this issue. So finance is saying yes, thank God. So one of the six of you, that's good. But we need a proposal that demonstrates the thoughtfulness to really go and attack this issue. These field offices are under siege. They're just, it's like they're like an emergency room. They're just triaging every single day. This budget proposal just continues that attitude. Just continues that. Business as usual, triaging is the same old, same old. It doesn't get us to where we need to go. It doesn't demonstrate that you heard us deploying the varieties of things that you're thinking about. So I think that's what we need. And I know that the new director's the acting director's only been there for a few months, and that's so I think you have an excuse, but the rest of your team hasn't only been there for 2 months. And the other 3,000 people who are working in Sacramento haven't been there for just 2 months. So this has to change. Has to change. And if we have to take more drastic measures, then we have to do that. You heard Ms. Smith, out of the box idea. Let's decentralize it. Maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe we need to decentralize it. And I think we have to think about new things. Because whatever we're doing, guess what? It's not working. It's not working for us. It's not working for you. I don't think anybody is sitting here, this is something that we are proud of. So until we get something that is backed up by some serious thinking and listening and demonstrates that you've heard our feedback, you've heard our constituents' feedback, we're not going to do that. We're not going to make the same mistake, because I don't want to have to come and call you back in 3 months and be like, okay, so, what's been done? Who's been trained? How many, do we have to do this every 3 months in committee? So again, I look forward to next week. Get your proposal ready, and we will discuss, but I think that will be it. If it's not up to snuff, we're not approving it. So thank you very much for being here. We are adjourning Budget Committee Sub 6.